Chapter 185. Lin Tian suddenly felt a little depressed. He finally understood why Jiyu treated him so differently. All of them thought that Jiyu didn't know how he saved her, but Jiyu actually knew, and she knew it very clearly. That day, she saw the entire process herself. Lin Tian's right hand moved, flipping to a new page. The Imperial Courtyard's new student assessment is held at Beast Devil Ridge, and he's also there. If it's him, he'll definitely pass. Half a month has passed, and he hasn't come out yet. However, I believe that he'll be fine. After waiting for 7 days in Beast Devil Ridge, he finally came out. I always believe that he'll be fine. This guy is so powerful in the Imperial Courtyard's first ranking battle. He actually reached the 59th place in the first round. I received a gift from him today, and I'm very happy. I want to raise it forever, and I'll always be happy when I see it. This guy actually almost killed Jiang Runwen, and his growth speed is so fast. However, Jiang Runwen isn't simple. His identity is extraordinary, and many people in the Imperial City are apprehensive of him. However, I believe that he'll be fine. Compared to him, Jiang Runwen is nothing, and he's not scary at all. The Crown Prince organized a hunting feast, and he'll also go. In Beast Devil Ridge, he might be in danger alone, and Jiang Runwen and the others might join forces to deal with him. I'll go too. At least, I'm stronger than them now. Oh, the two of us can stay together for a long time, and I'll protect him well, definitely. He fell off the cliff. I believe that he's still alive. It's been half a month, and he still hasn't come out. However, I still believe that he'll come back. Reading until here, Lin Tian clearly saw that the booklet was soaked by some kind of liquid. His hands couldn't help but tremble slightly. Now, even someone as powerful as him felt a lump in his throat looking at these delicate words. After a pause, he flipped to the last page. The next time we meet, I won't hide my feelings anymore. I want to tell him that my heart has been with him since a long time ago. If I don't say anything, that guy won't feel it. He's too stupid, too dumb. The words disappeared here, and there was nothing else after that. Lin Tian clenched his fists, his nails digging deep into his flesh. He was indeed very stupid. A faint light flashed across his eyes as he carefully put the booklet into his stone ring. At the same time, he also put away the nebula flower beside the window. After glancing around the room, he slowly walked out and carefully closed the door behind him. The wind was blowing, the snow was falling, and the air was very cold. Lin Tian stared at the massive general's mansion. He glanced at the corpses strewn all over the courtyard, and then walked out. He's out. Take him down. It must be the enemy. There were dozens of powerful soldiers standing outside the general's residence, and many of them were divine Vane realm experts. Lin Tian had forced his way into the general's residence. Naturally, the nearby generals had found out about it, and some of them had hurried over. Kill! One of the commanders shouted coldly. Immediately, a group of soldiers rushed towards Lin Tian, each one ruthless and merciless. Lin Tian was expressionless as he walked out of the mansion step by step. Clang! The thunderous roar of the sword reverberated in all directions. In this space, snowflakes fluttered in the air as a gale swept up. Immediately after, everything quieted down. Bang! 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 The dozens of soldiers fell into a pool of blood one after another. None of them survived, including the divine Vane realm experts. All of them are dead. What happened? What did he do? I didn't see anything just now. Dozens of zhang away. Some of the onlookers' expressions changed, and their faces turned pale. Lin Tian didn't show any emotion. He just walked into the distance, ignoring the corpses on the ground and the crowd around him. He walked straight in one direction. Instantly, the crowd in front of him made way for him. About an hour later, Lin Tian arrived in front of a luxurious pavilion, the treasure loft. "Sir, how can I help you?" A female attendant came up to him. The treasure loft was the largest auction house in the Imperial City. The female attendants inside were naturally very polite. Lin Tian didn't say anything. He took out the silver token that Xan Yao had given him. The female attendant was moved, and her expression became even more respectful. "Sir, please wait for a moment. I will go and report to Attendant Xin." As she spoke, the female attendant quickly ran to the second floor. Lin Tian stood quietly in the same place. At this moment, laughter sounded not far away. A man and a woman walked out of the auction house. The woman was pretty and charming. She was holding a pair of purple and gold bracelets. Her face was filled with excitement. The man was about 35 years old. He was well-dressed and had an arrogant look on his face. There were many people nearby. They all looked at the middle-aged man with a respectful expression. "Sir Su is so generous. Sir Su, please take care. Sir Su, would you do me the honor of coming to Immortal Knowledge Water Tower for a meal?" There were many people beside the man. Lin Tian tilted his head and looked over. The middle-aged man was the guest of the Lung family, Su Huarong. Su Huarong seemed to be enjoying the crowd's flattery. However, he suddenly felt a cold intent and raised his head to look. Su Huarong's expression changed drastically. "Lin Tian, you're not dead?" Not long ago, Lung Feng had told Su Huarong that Lin Tian was dead, and this allowed Su Huarong to vent his anger in his heart. However, at this moment, Su Huarong had never imagined that he would actually meet Lin Tian once more in the treasure-gathering pavilion. Lin Tian was alive and well. Damn it! Su Huarong's expression was ugly. He quickly retreated and was about to leave the treasure loft. Lin Tian was not dead. This was big news. He had to inform the Lung family. Lin Tian stared at Su Huarong. A dagger appeared in his right hand. Lightning and fire immediately intertwined. His expression did not change from beginning to end. He raised his right hand, and the dagger in his hand flew towards Su Huarong like lightning. Poof! The dagger drew a streak of lightning and fire. It instantly pierced Su Huarong's throat, bringing with it a glaring ray of blood. Su Huarong trembled. He did not even have time to scream before he softly fell to the ground. "Sir Su! Murder!" Waves of screams rang out. The huge hall of the treasure loft was in chaos. A figure rushed out. It was Yang Luo, one of the people in charge of the treasure loft. Yang Luo's expression changed drastically when he saw the scene in the hall. However, when his gaze fell on Lin Tian, he did not say a word. He knew that Lin Tian had the silver token, the symbol of the Xin family's heir candidate. "Sir Yang." Many female attendants came over. Their faces were pale as they looked at Lin Tian in fear. The treasure loft had an extraordinary status in the imperial city. After all, it was established by the wealthy Xin family. Who would dare to mess around in the treasure loft? These female attendants did not expect that someone would dare to kill someone in the treasure loft. "Sir, quick! Catch him! It's him! He killed Sir Su!" Dozens of female attendants shouted. Yang Luo's expression darkened. He shouted in a low voice, "Silence!" Lin Tian was not an ordinary person. Yang Luo had no right to interfere in this matter. Inside the treasure loft, pairs of eyes fell on Lin Tian. Many people pointed at him, wondering who the young man in front of them was. How could he be so bold? At this moment, someone walked down from the second floor of the treasure loft. It was a middle-aged man in a long robe. He exuded a powerful aura. "Sir Deacon, look at this." Yang Luo walked up to him. The middle-aged man was none other than Xin Jingye. Xin Jingye stared at Su Huarong's corpse in the distance, then looked at Lin Tian. His expression changed slightly. Xin Jingye had some status in the Xin family. Not long ago, he heard rumors of Lin Tian's death. However, he did not expect that Lin Tian was still alive and standing in front of him. "Why?" Xin Jingye glanced at Su Huarong's corpse and stared at Lin Tian. Xin Jingye's tone was somewhat unfriendly. Killing someone in the treasure loft had never happened since the treasure loft was established. Moreover, the person who died in the treasure loft today was not an ordinary person. He was a third-stage array manipulator and a guest of the Lung family. This would have a bad impact on the treasure loft. Lin Tian walked up to Xin Jingye and said, "I want something." Xin Jingye's expression darkened. He became colder when Lin Tian did not answer his question. "I'm asking you why you did this." Engineer said coldly. A powerful aura swept out from him. There were many martial artists around. Their expressions changed when they felt the aura. Peak divine range. Someone gulped. Lin Tian's expression did not change at all as he faced Engineer's aura. He took another step forward. I want something. He stared at Engineer without any expression on his face. There was a cold aura around him. He was not in a good mood. In fact, he was in a terrible mood. Engineer trembled when he saw Lin Tian's eyes. He could not help but take a step back. Lin Tian's eyes were indifferent, but Engineer saw something terrifying in them. It was like the Grim Reaper's blade, which made his soul tremble. After steadying himself, Engineer swallowed his saliva and took a deep breath to calm himself down. Yang Luo, I'll leave this to you, Engineer said. Then, Engineer looked at Lin Tian and said, come with me to the second floor. Everyone was shocked when they heard Engineer's words. That's it? The second floor? Many people were shocked. Engineer released a powerful aura. Almost everyone thought that Engineer was going to directly suppress Lin Tian, but they didn't expect that Engineer would say such words in the end. Not only did he not pursue the matter, he even invited Lin Tian to the second floor. This made some people, including Yang Luo, reveal strange expressions. Engineer did not care about these people's expressions. He led the way to the second floor. Lin Tian was expressionless. He followed Engineer to the second floor. Soon, they arrived at a room on the second floor. Not long ago, Engineer heard that you died in Demonic Beast Ridge. He was sad for a long time, but he did not expect you to still be alive. However, it's too troublesome for you to kill Su Huarong like this. Engineer frowned. He thought for a while and asked, also, you said you wanted something. What do you want? A treasure. Chapter 186. Engineer didn't ask Lin Tian why he wanted the treasure. After all, Lin Tian was a martial arts cultivator. It was normal for him to look for stronger weapons. Just in time, a sword just arrived at Treasure Loft. Engineer said, how much is it? Lin Tian asked. Engineer thought for a moment and said, you have a silver token. Sell it at the original price. 15 million spirit coins. Lin Tian nodded and took out a purple card. The Lin family's property was in Fengjian City. He had been in Fengjian City for a long time. Not long ago, the Qin family had completely collected the Xiao family's property. Together with the money earned from the Lin family's property, there were more than 20 million spirit coins. Engineer was surprised. He didn't expect Lin Tian to be so rich. Wait a moment, Engineer said, and walked to the back room. Soon, Engineer came up with a sword case and handed it to Lin Tian. Low-grade treasure. It's called the Soul Sword. Engineer said. Lin Tian opened the case. There was a 4-foot-long sword in the case. It was cold and seemed to be able to cut through everything. Lin Tian was somewhat satisfied. Holding the sword hilt, he shook it slightly and put it into the stone ring. Low-grade treasure could increase the user's combat power by 80%. Thank you, he said to Engineer. As he spoke, he turned around and walked out. Wait! Engineer called Lin Tian. He hesitated for a moment and said, the general's mansion. Lin Tian had come to Treasure Loft with Jiyu. They seemed to be close. Engineer knew that Lin Tian and the general's mansion had some relationship. At least he was good friends with Jiyu. Now that the general's mansion was in trouble, Engineer wanted to know Lin Tian's reaction. Lin Tian stopped in his tracks, and Engineer could feel that the air had turned colder. The cold air made Engineer's expression change slightly. It was obviously a terrifying killing intent. Lin Tian tilted his head and looked at Engineer. Do you think Ji Yuanshan will usurp the throne? Engineer shook his head in silence. Old General Ji has fought on the battlefield for dozens of years. He has assisted several generations of kings of Beiyin. His prestige is too great. Now that the new king has ascended to the throne, he doesn't want anyone who can threaten his throne. So, Engineer sighed. This is what they mean by the saying, one's achievements frightens the ruler. In history, there have been many people like this. My achievements shake the emperor? Lin Tianling smiled. All of a sudden, Xinjingye felt an even colder aura. His heart couldn't help but shrink. Taking a deep breath, Xinjingye said, "Tomorrow, the new king will personally parade General Ji through the streets, and then behead him." At this point, Xinjingye felt a little helpless. In fact, many people in the Northern Flame country were critical of the royal family's actions. After all, Ji Yuanshan had contributed a lot to the Northern Flame country, and several of his sons had died on the battlefield. In the past few decades, it could be said that Ji Yuanshan had protected the peace of Beiyin. However, the new king, Zhu Wudao, didn't care because he had evidence of Ji Yuanshan's rebellion. "I know. That's why I'm here to get the sword," Lin Tian said coldly. Hearing this, Xinjingye's expression changed. You want to?" Lin Tian didn't say anything else. He stepped forward and walked out. Staring at Lin Tian's back, Xinjingye felt something hit his chest. The young man's back, at this moment, was so majestic. A day passed quickly. It was late winter. The sky was filled with heavy snow. The majestic ancient buildings in the imperial city were covered in white snow. The whole world was shrouded in pure white. The air was cold. However, on this day, the streets of the imperial city were filled with people. In the distance, a group of soldiers walked over. There were at least a few hundred of them. In the middle of the group, there was a Vajra cage. In the cage, there was an old man. His long hair was loose, and he looked haggard. "Ji Yuanshan, that old general. I never thought that old General Ji would have the intention to rebel." Sigh, the human heart. Many people murmured. Clang, 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 clang. It was the sound of hundreds of soldiers' armor. At the same time, the sound of the soldiers' footsteps shook the streets of the imperial city. In the middle of the hundreds of soldiers, 4 figures stood out. Zhu Wudao, Jiang Runwen, Duan Wenba, and Lung Feng. The former general, Ji Yuanshan, secretly colluded with the enemy and attempted to usurp the throne. He failed to live up to the trust of the previous emperors. Today, he will be paraded through the streets and executed. In the middle of the hundreds of soldiers, a commander shouted loudly. His voice spread quickly, causing many onlookers on both sides of the street to point and shake their heads. In the cage, Ji Yuanshan was unkempt like a beggar. He didn't care about the commander's words at all. "After today, everything will be settled," Duan Wenba said. Lung Feng nodded. Zhu Wudao wore a crown and smiled faintly. The 4 of them talked calmly. The sound of horse hooves could be heard. The wheels of the cage ran over the ground, leaving wet marks. Suddenly, the wind and snow became heavier. Heavy snow rolled in all directions. Many people couldn't help but cover their eyes. "This weather is really strange," someone muttered. The swirling wind and snow dispersed. At this moment, the soldiers at the front suddenly stopped. "Why did you stop?" the commander shouted. The crowd looked forward. At the end of the street, a young man in a long robe was standing there. His slender figure stood straight, like an immortal heavenly monument. Lin Tian, Jiang Renwen's eyes suddenly became as cold as a sharp sword. His killing intent was overflowing. Duan Wenba and Lung Feng's expressions changed. Lin Tian, who fell off the cliff, was still alive. Zhu Wudao's eyes narrowed slightly, then calmed down. In the cage, Ji Yuanshan raised his head and was shocked. He revealed a surprised expression. "Little brother, you're still alive." After a pause, Ji Yuanshan seemed to have thought of something. His expression suddenly changed. "What are you doing here? Leave now." Lin Tian's expression was calm. He didn't move at all. "Old general, if time went back a few decades, would you still fight for Beiyin?" Looking at Ji Yuanshan, Lin Tian asked. Ji Yuanshan was silent for a moment, then said, "Yes." Lin Tian was still calm. "Why?" "For the people," Ji Yuanshan said. Lin Tian glanced at the onlookers on both sides of the street and sneered. "For the people?" Meeting Lin Tian's gaze, the onlookers trembled. They clearly felt a strong sense of mockery. Staring at Ji Yuanshan, Lin Tiandao said, "As a junior, I don't want to deny your thoughts. But I still want to say that this kind of thinking is very stupid. You bled at the border. Your son died for the empire. You assisted several generations of emperors. You protected Bayan's peace for decades. You swept away the chaos at the border. But so what? Who would remember you? The royal family framed you and wanted to get rid of you because of your merits. The commoners that you have always protected, even if they knew that you were wrongly accused, no one would stand up for you. Your beliefs are worthless. His calm words moved most of the onlookers. On both sides of the street, some of the onlookers looked ashamed. Many of them lowered their heads. Among these people, there were indeed many who knew the royal family's thoughts. They knew that Ji Yuanshan was wronged. But in the face of the huge royal family, who would dare to stand up for Ji Yuanshan? That would be defying the royal power. 9 generations of the family would be exterminated. Presumptuous! Take him down! A commander shouted. Suddenly, the dozens of soldiers at the front all rushed toward Lin Tian. Little brother, leave quickly, Ji Yuanshan said anxiously. Lin Tian's expression was indifferent. If it were me, I wouldn't contribute to this country. Because I'm not worthy. Clang! The clanging of swords sounded, and the dazzling lightning sword chi swept in all directions. Puff! 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 Blood splattered. In an instant, the dozens of soldiers who rushed forward were all killed and fell into a pool of blood. Such a scene instantly shocked everyone. On both sides of the street, all the onlookers were shocked, and all of them were in chaos. Traitor! Go capture him! The commander was furious. There were hundreds of soldiers on the street. In terms of combat strength, they were naturally not weak. Suddenly, more soldiers rushed toward Lin Tian. Lin Tian walked toward the cage step by step, as if he didn't see the dense crowd of soldiers rushing toward him. He stared straight at Ji Yuanshan. Now, you are paraded through the street and are about to be executed. And your only granddaughter, Ji Yu, is under house arrest in the royal palace. Tell me, what's the point of fighting on the battlefield for so many years? The violent killing intent swept across the sky, and the destructive sword chi clanged. Puff! 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 Blood fell like rain. The soldiers fell one by one, and their lives were mercilessly reaped. This was a terrifying scene. A slender silhouette, holding a long sword, was moving forward with hundreds of soldiers. No one could get within 10 feet of this silhouette. Anyone who tried to get close to him was torn into pieces by the violent sword intent. Even some of the early-stage divine range experts were no exception. Ji Yuanshan's face became a little ugly, and he couldn't help but clench his fist. The commander who escorted Ji Yuanshan was furious and rushed forward personally. Die! The commander's cultivation was at the peak of the 8th sky of divine range, and his combat strength was very strong. He suddenly pressed down with the Xianhua axe in his hand. Lin Tian turned a blind eye to it. He waved his hand. An array of azure thunder, sword chi swept over. Puff! The commander's throat was directly penetrated. Blood fell like rain, and he died on the spot. On both sides of the street, many onlookers looked pale. He wants to rob the prisoner carriage. He dares to openly go against the royal family. The new king is still here. Everyone's face changed color. The royal family of Beiyin looked down on the entire empire. Now, there was someone who dared to kill the soldiers of the empire in front of the king of Beiyin. This crime was too serious. Let me do it. A cold voice sounded. Zhang Renwen's face was cold. He jumped up and came to Lin Tian. You actually survived after falling off the cliff. You're lucky. Just right. I'll kill you myself today, Zhang Renwen said coldly. He unsheathed his bejeweled sword, and a terrifying sword aura condensed, crushing all the surrounding snowflakes. Trash. Lin Tianji only had 2 words. He held the heart spirit sword in his hand, and the lightning sword radiance vibrated. He slashed out, and with a bang, Zhang Renwen was sent flying several feet away. Chapter 187. Yes. Xi Jingye didn't ask Lin Tian why he wanted the treasure. After all, Lin Tian was a martial arts cultivator. It was normal for him to look for stronger weapons. Just in time, A sword just arrived at Treasure Loft. Ex-engineer said. How much is it? Lin Tian asked. Ex-engineer thought for a moment and said, You have a silver token. Sell it at the original price. 15 million spirit coins. Lin Tian nodded and took out a purple card. The Lin family's property was in Fengjian City. He had been in Fengjian City for a long time. Not long ago, the Qin family had completely collected the Xiao family's property. Together with the money earned from the Lin family's property, there were more than 20 million spirit coins. Ex-engineer was surprised. He didn't expect Lin Tian to be so rich. Wait a moment, ex-engineer said and walked to the back room. Soon, ex-engineer came up with a sword case and handed it to Lin Tian. Low-grade treasure. It's called the Soul Sword. Ex-engineer said. Lin Tian opened the case. There was a 4-foot-long sword in the case. It was cold and seemed to be able to cut through everything. Lin Tian was somewhat satisfied. Holding the sword hilt, he shook it slightly and put it into the stone ring. Low-grade treasure could increase the combat power of its owner by 80%. Thank you, he said to ex-engineer. As he spoke, he turned around and walked out. Wait, ex-engineer called Lin Tian. He hesitated for a moment and said, The general's mansion. Lin Tian had come to Treasure Loft with Jiyu. They seemed to be very close. Ex-engineer knew that Lin Tian and the general's mansion might have some relationship. At least, he and Jiyu were good friends. Now that the general's mansion was in trouble, ex-engineer wanted to know Lin Tian's reaction. Lin Tian stopped in his tracks, and ex-engineer felt that the air had suddenly become colder. The coldness made ex-engineer's expression change. It was a horrible killing intent. Lin Tian tilted his head and looked at ex-engineer. Do you think Ji Yuanshan will usurp the throne? Ex-engineer shook his head in silence. Old General Ji has fought on the battlefield for dozens of years. He has assisted several generations of kings of Beiyin. His prestige is too great. Now that the new king has ascended to the throne, he doesn't want anyone who can threaten his throne. So, ex-engineer sighed. This is what they mean by the saying, one's achievements can shake the ruler. In history, there are many people like this. My achievements shake the emperor. Lin Tianling smiled. All of a sudden, ex-engineer felt an even colder aura. His heart couldn't help but shrink. Taking a deep breath, ex-engineer said, Tomorrow, the new king will personally parade General Ji through the streets, and then behead him. At this point, ex-engineer felt a little helpless. In fact, many people in the Northern Flame country were critical of the royal family's actions. After all, Ji Yuanshan had contributed a lot to the Northern Flame country, and several of his sons had died on the battlefield. In the past few decades, it could be said that Ji Yuanshan had protected the peace of Beiyin. However, the new king, Zhu Wudao, didn't care because he had evidence of Ji Yuanshan's rebellion. I know. That's why I'm here to get the sword, Lin Tian said coldly. Hearing this, ex-engineer's expression changed. You want a Lin Tian didn't say anything else. He stepped forward and walked out. Staring at Lin Tian's back, ex-engineer felt something hit his chest. The young man's back, at this moment, was so majestic. A day passed quickly. It was late winter. The sky was filled with heavy snow. The majestic ancient buildings in the imperial city were covered in white snow. The whole world was shrouded in pure white. The air was cold. However, on this day, the streets of the imperial city were filled with people. In the distance, a group of soldiers walked over. There were at least a few hundred of them. In the middle of the group, there was a Vajra cage. In the cage, there was an old man. His long hair was loose, and he looked haggard. Ji Yuanshan, that old general. I never thought that old General Ji would have the intention to rebel. Sigh. The human heart. Many people murmured. Clang, 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 clang. It was the sound of hundreds of soldiers' armor. At the same time, the sound of the soldiers' footsteps shook the streets of the imperial city. In the middle of the hundreds of soldiers, four figures stood out. Zhu Wudao, Jiang Runwen, Duan Wenba, and Lung Feng. The former general, Ji Yuanshan, secretly colluded with the enemy and attempted to usurp the throne. He failed to live up to the trust of the previous emperors. Today, He will be paraded through the streets and executed. In the middle of the hundreds of soldiers, a commander shouted loudly. His voice spread quickly, causing many onlookers on both sides of the street to point and shake their heads. In the cage, Ji Yuanshan was unkempt like a beggar. He didn't care about the commander's words at all. After today, everything will be settled, Duan Wenba said. Lung Feng nodded. Zhu Wudao wore a crown and smiled faintly. The four of them talked calmly. The sound of horse hooves echoed in the air. The wheels of the cage ran over the ground, leaving wet marks. Suddenly, the wind and snow became heavier. Heavy snow rolled in all directions, causing many people to cover their eyes. This weather is really strange, someone muttered. The swirling wind and snow dispersed. At this moment, the soldier at the front suddenly stopped. Why did you stop? The commander shouted. The crowd looked forward. At the end of the street, a young man in a long robe stood there. His slender figure stood straight, like an immortal heavenly monument. Lin Tian. Jiang Renwen's eyes suddenly became as cold as a sharp sword, filled with murderous intent. Duan Wenba and Lung Feng's expressions changed. Lin Tian, who fell off the cliff, was still alive. Zhu Wudao's eyes narrowed slightly, then calmed down. In the cage, Ji Yuanshan raised his head and was shocked. He revealed a surprised expression. Little brother, you're still alive? After a pause, Ji Yuanshan seemed to have thought of something. His expression suddenly changed. What are you doing here? Leave quickly. Lin Tian's expression was calm, and he didn't move at all. Old general, if time went back a few decades, would you still fight for Beiyin on the battlefield? Looking at Ji Yuanshan, Lin Tian asked. Ji Yuanshan was silent for a moment, then said, yes. Lin Tian was still calm. Why? For the people, Ji Yuanshan said. Lin Tian glanced at the onlookers on both sides of the street, revealing a cold smile. For the people? Meeting Lin Tian's gaze, the onlookers trembled, clearly feeling a strong sense of mockery. Staring at Ji Yuanshan, Lin Tiandao said, as a junior, I don't want to deny your thoughts, but I still want to say that this kind of thinking is very stupid. You bled at the border. Your son died for the empire. You assisted several generations of emperors. You protected Baiyin's peace for decades and swept away the chaos at the border. But so what? Who would remember you? The royal family framed you and wanted to get rid of you because of your merits. The commoners that you have always protected. Even if they knew that you were wrongly accused, no one would stand up for you. Your beliefs are worthless. His calm words immediately moved most of the onlookers. On both sides of the street, some onlookers looked ashamed, and many people lowered their heads. Among these people, there were indeed many who knew the royal family's thoughts and knew that Ji Yuanshan was wronged. But in the face of the huge royal family, who would dare to stand up for Ji Yuanshan? That would be disobeying the royal power, and 9 generations of the family would be exterminated. Presumptuous! Take him down! A commander shouted. Suddenly, the dozens of soldiers at the front all rushed toward Lin Tian. Little brother, leave quickly, Ji Yuanshan said anxiously. Lin Tian's expression was indifferent. If it were me, I wouldn't contribute to this country because I'm not worthy. Clang! The clanging of swords sounded, and the dazzling lightning sword chi swept in all directions. Puff! 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 Blood splattered, and in an instant, the dozens of soldiers who rushed forward were all killed, falling into a pool of blood. Such a scene instantly shocked everyone. On both sides of the street, all the onlookers were shocked, and all of them were in chaos. Traitor! Go capture him! The commander was furious. There were hundreds of soldiers on the street, and in terms of combat strength, they were naturally not weak. Suddenly, more soldiers rushed toward Lin Tian. Lin Tianyi walked toward the cage step by step, as if he didn't see the dense crowd of soldiers rushing toward him. He stared straight at Ji Yuanshan. Now, you're being paraded through the street, and you're going to be executed on the street. And your only granddaughter, Ji Yu, is under house arrest in the palace. Tell me, what's the point of fighting on the battlefield for so many years? The violent killing intent swept across the sky, and the destructive sword chi clanged. Puff, puff, puff. Blood fell like rain, and the soldiers fell one by one, and their lives were mercilessly reaped. This was a terrifying scene. A slender silhouette, holding a long sword, was moving forward with hundreds of soldiers. No one could get within 10 feet of this silhouette. Anyone who tried to get close to him was torn into pieces by the violent sword intent. Even some of the early-stage divine range experts were no exception. Ji Yuanshan's face became a little ugly, and he couldn't help but clench his fist. The commander who escorted Ji Yuanshan was furious and rushed forward personally. Die! The commander's cultivation was at the peak of the 8th sky of divine range, and his combat strength was very strong. He suddenly pressed down with the Xianhua axe in his hand. Lin Tian turned a blind eye and waved his hand. An array of azure thunder, sword chi swept over. Puff! The commander's throat was directly penetrated, and blood fell like rain. He died on the spot. On both sides of the street, many onlookers looked pale. He wants to rob the prisoner carriage. He dares to openly go against the royal family. The new king is still here. Everyone's face changed color. The royal family of the Northern Flame country looked down on the entire empire. Now, there was someone who dared to kill the soldiers of the empire in front of the king of the Northern Flame country. This crime was too serious. A cold voice sounded. Jiang Renwen's face was cold, and he jumped up and came to Lin Tian. You actually survived after falling off the cliff. You're lucky. Just right. I'll kill you myself today, Jiang Renwen said coldly. He unsheathed his bejeweled sword, and a terrifying sword aura condensed, crushing all the surrounding snowflakes. Trash. Lin Tianji only had 2 words. Chapter 188. Jiang Renwen was sent flying and fell to the ground with a bang. He spat out a mouthful of blood. How is this possible? That Jiang Renwen, many people were shocked. There was practically no one in the imperial city who didn't know Jiang Renwen's name. He was known as the #1 person in his generation. However, at this moment, such a powerful Jiang Renwen couldn't even block a single strike from Lin Tian. Jiang Renwen stood up with a pale face. Lin Tianyi slashed out with his sword, creating a terrifying hurricane. With a bang, Jiang Renwen was sent flying again. Looking up, his eyes were extremely cold as he stared at Zhu Wudao. Ji was imprisoned in the imperial palace. Now, his killing intent towards Zhu Wudao was far greater than his killing intent towards Jiang Renwen. Suppress him. Go! On the streets of the imperial city, hundreds of soldiers moved together and all rushed towards Lin Tian. Clang! The inner spirit sword was entwined with lightning. Dense sword chi swept in all directions, wantonly reaping lives. Screams echoed immediately. Blood splattered as the soldiers fell one by one. Lin Tian was expressionless. He waved the long sword in his hand. A clanging sword light flashed and instantly turned into a sword rain, sweeping in all directions. In an instant, dozens of lives were taken. Little brother, stop! Ji Yuanshan shouted. Lin Tian was expressionless. He just walked forward step by step. Violent sword chi spread out from his body. Anyone who came close was killed by this sword chi without exception. Clang! A terrifying sword sound rang out. Jiang Renwen held up his treasured sword and slashed towards this side. Suddenly, a terrifying sword intent intertwined, causing the air to become cold. Jiang family's Frost Soul sword technique. Die! At this moment, Jiang Renwen used a killer move of the Frost Soul sword technique, causing many soldiers to retreat. Then, a huge rainbow light rushed past and directly pressed towards Lin Tian. Little brother, get out of the way! Ji Yuanshan shouted. As a general, Ji Yuanshan's strength was extraordinary. Naturally, he knew how terrifying the Jiang family's sword technique was. Lin Tian did not show any emotion in the face of the oncoming sword force. He raised his right hand and slashed down with his sword. With a ripping sound, Jiang Renwen's terrifying sword light was directly slashed apart, dissipating like a spark. Impossible! Jiang Renwen's face changed. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings changed. Such a powerful sword energy was actually shattered with a single strike. In the distance, Lung Feng and the other two were visibly moved. What's going on? How did he? Lung Feng was shocked. Lung Feng had also reached the 8th heavenly layer of the divine range, and his battle prowess had greatly increased. However, at this moment, he was still shocked by Lin Tian's battle prowess. He was actually able to suppress Jiang Renwen. Duan Wenba also stared ahead, his eyes filled with shock. Kill! At this moment, a loud roar was heard. Jiang Renwen's face looked a little ferocious. He performed the Jiang family's Frost Soul Sword technique to the extreme. With one strike, he slashed out dozens of dazzling sword chi, encircling Lin Tian. At the same time, he also moved closer. Instantly, the surrounding sword chi roared and gradually condensed into a substantial sword, tearing all the snowflakes apart. This sword chi is even stronger than before. Many people were shocked. The crowd felt the aura emitted by Jiang Renwen at this moment, and their hearts trembled. It was too terrifying. Lin Tian stared at Jiang Renwen, his expression unchanged. Trash. It was still the same two simple words. He raised the sword in his hand, and the lightning crackled. Then, he directly slashed out with his sword. Suddenly, all the sword chi around Jiang Renwen's body dissipated, and with a bang, he was sent flying again. Cough! While still in the air, Jiang Renwen coughed out a mouthful of blood essence. Looking at this scene, the crowd was stunned. The powerful Jiang Renwen was actually so weak at this moment. This time, the onlookers were completely stunned, and the group of soldiers were also stunned on the spot. After sweeping Jiang Renwen away, Lin Tian didn't care at all. He walked step by step toward Ji Yuanshan's cage. How dare you? A soldier shouted angrily. Unfortunately, what greeted this person was only a sword. After a sword, this divine pulse realm soldier directly fell into a pool of blood. In an instant, many soldiers surrounded him again. Although these soldiers were terrified, they didn't dare to not attack. Whoever stops me will die. A cold voice sounded. The lightning sword hummed, and sword chi swept in all directions. Then, there was only blood sputtering. In less than a quarter of an hour, Lin Tian killed more than 200 soldiers and came to Ji Yuanshan's side. Little brother Yu, Ji Yuanshan was worried and touched at the same time. With a clang, Lin Tian waved his hand, and the azure lightning sword chi vibrated, and the cage that trapped Ji Yuanshan was cut into pieces. He really broke out of the cage. This is ruthless. On both sides of the street, many onlookers were shocked. Although they knew from the beginning that Lin Tian came to break out of the cage, when they saw Lin Tian cut open the cage, they were still incomparably shocked. In the next moment, something shocking happened again. After cutting open the cage, everyone thought that Lin Tian would retreat with Ji Yuanshan, but they didn't expect that Lin Tian would directly go around the cage and press forward. What is he going to do? That seems to be the new king's position. He can't be going to. Everyone's eyes widened. In Lin Tian's hand, the inner spirit sword crackled with lightning, and the sword intent was terrifying. Ji Yuanshan's expression also changed, staring at Lin Tian's back. Lin Tian was actually pressing toward the new king, Zhu Wudao. In the blink of an eye, Lin Tian was 50 feet away from Zhu Wudao and the others. Raising his head, he stared at Zhu Wudao, his eyes frighteningly cold. Return Ji Yu to me? Zhu Wudao's eyes narrowed, and he tilted his head to look at Duan Wenba and Lung Feng. Your Highness, don't worry, Duan Wenba said. As he spoke, Duan Wenba and Lung Feng leaped off their horses at the same time, one holding a spear and the other a sword. Traitor, I'll kill the two of you right here, Lung Feng said. An upper-grade treasure appeared in Lung Feng's hand, and he activated the soul-chasing puppet. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of Lin Tian. At the same time, Duan Wenba slashed out an upper-grade treasure spear, and with the force of 10,000 pounds, he swung it at Lin Tian. Boom! When the two of them worked together, their combat strength could be said to be astonishing, and they were even stronger than Jiang Renwen. Lin Tian's face finally showed a trace of ruthlessness. On the inner spirit sword, the light of lightning exploded in an instant, as if real lightning had fallen, piercing the ears of many people. Clang! With a swing of the sword, 10,000 swords roared. Blood splattered, and the treasure sword in Lung Feng's hand was cut in half. At the same time, the cold edge of the sword slashed across his body, and before he could react, he was cut in half. With a bang, Lung Feng's broken body fell to the ground. His lips moved, and the light in his eyes dissipated. One strike, and he was cut in half. Lung Feng! Zhu Wudao's expression changed. At this time, Duan Wenba's spear came down from the sky and smashed hard on Lin Tian's shoulder. Die! Duan Wenba sneered. Duan Wenba was surprised by Lung Feng's tragic death, but he was not heartbroken. What did the death of the Lung family have to do with him? This strike landed firmly on Lin Tian's body, and even an expert at the ninth heaven of the divine range would not be able to withstand it. Little brother! Ji Yuanshan's expression changed, and he rushed over. But in the next moment, Ji Yuanshan stopped abruptly because in front of him, Lin Tian raised his left hand and directly grabbed the spear that Duan Wenba pressed on his shoulder. Duan Wenba's expression changed. After receiving such a heavy blow, Lin Tian could still move? How was this possible? Holding Duan Wenba's spear, Lin Tian did not look at Duan Wenba, but stared coldly at Zhu Wu. Give me back my Ji. With a clang, a sword slashed across Duan Wenba's chest with an ear-piercing sound. Ah! With a blood-curdling scream, Duan Wenba let go of the spear and staggered back, covering his chest with both hands. Blood seeped through the gaps between his fingers and kept flowing down. Staring at Lin Tian, he could not stop gasping for breath, and his body trembled. Then he fell to the ground with a bang, and after twitching a few times, he stopped moving, and the light of life in his eyes dissipated. Lin Tian's sword directly pierced through his heart. Even if he was an expert at the Sea of Knowledge realm, there was no way he could survive. Wenba! Finally, Zhu Wudao's expression changed. Lung Feng and Duan Wenba were the future successors of the Lung family and the Duan family. After he succeeded the throne, he would need their support, but now, both of them had been killed by Lin Tian here. The crowd was also stunned, and they were all dumbstruck. Those two were killed in an instant. Someone muttered. Lung Feng was ranked 7th on the Imperial City's honor roll list, and Duan Wenba was ranked 3rd. Moreover, both of them were the future successors of the Lung family and the Duan family respectively. But today, they were killed so easily. Staring at Lin Tian's figure, everyone could not help but gulp. Too powerful. Too ruthless. Ji Yuanshan stared at Lin Tian's back, and he was also stunned on the spot. In Lin Tian's hand, the inner spirit sword shone brightly as he approached Zhu Wudao step by step. Give her back to me. His expression became somewhat ferocious. The long sword in his hand trembled, and an unprecedentedly terrifying sword chi swept out, fiercely rushing toward Zhu Wudao. The violent killing intent was frightening, and many onlookers on both sides were shocked to the point of spitting out blood. How dare you? A cold shout was heard. A figure rushed out from behind Zhu Wudao, and with a palm, he shattered Lin Tian's sword chi. It was an old man in a green robe, and his beard was white. He stood in front of Zhu Wudao and stared coldly at Lin Tian. Spiritual Ocean Realm Cultivator. Lin Tian looked up, and the coldness in his eyes became more intense. The inner spirit sword trembled, and the light of lightning intertwined. Then the power of fire emerged, and the two merged together, as if a thunder-fire dragon was roaring. The horrifying sword aura shocked all the onlookers, and they broke out in cold sweat. Get lost! Lin Tian raised his hand and slashed forward. The inner spirit sword trembled, and the thunder-fire sword swept across the sky and instantly arrived in front of the spiritual ocean realm old man. Chapter 189. On the streets of the Imperial City, everyone was stunned. their eyes wide open. Read, a Sea of Consciousness realm expert was sent flying by a single slash. Oh my God! Someone muttered to himself, completely dumbfounded. In Lin Tian's hand, the inner soul sword was intertwined with the power of lightning and fire. His eyes were extremely cold. Facing Zhu Wudao, he approached step by step. The murderous intent on his body was extremely terrifying, causing the air to turn colder. Is he trying to kill the emperor? Someone said in a trembling voice. Zhu Wudao's expression finally turned ugly. He did not expect Lin Tian to be so powerful in just a month. He could even fight against a Sea of Consciousness realm expert for a short period of time. Little brother, stop. This is the Emperor of Beiyin. You must not attack him. Ji Yuanshan ran over and pulled Lin Tian back. Get out of the way. Lin Tianyi flicked his sleeve and pushed Ji Yuanshan back. The inner soul sword in his hand vibrated even more violently. Lightning and fire intertwined, and his murderous, intent soared into the sky. Lin Tian, stop! A familiar voice rang out. Two figures rushed over. They were the elders of Beiyin Imperial Courtyard, Han He and Lu Lan. Lu Lan said in a low voice, stop it now. This is the current emperor of Beiyin. What are you doing? The current emperor? So what? Lin Tian's voice was cold. He did not care about Han He and Lu Lan's arrival at all. He was still closing in on Zhu Wudao with a murderous look on his face. Han He's and Lu Lan's expressions turned ugly. Their faces darkened. Staring at Lin Tian, Han He said in a low voice, don't forget that you are a student of Beiyin Imperial Courtyard and an elder of Beiyin Imperial Courtyard. Now, I order you to stop. As for your crime, we will ask for His Majesty's forgiveness. Lin Tian stopped and raised his head to look at Han He and Lu Lan. He stretched out his left hand, and the Imperial Courtyard token appeared in his hand. Crack! He clenched his left hand slightly, and with a crisp sound, the Imperial Courtyard token shattered on the spot. Not anymore, Li Yundong said. He said coldly. You! Han He and Lu Lan were both furious and helpless at the same time. In the surroundings, many onlookers were shocked when they saw this scene. He is a disciple of the Northern Flame Imperial Academy. He actually managed to shatter the Imperial Courtyard's identity plate. How could this be? Many people were shocked. The Northern Flame Imperial Courtyard was the most prestigious martial palace in the entire Northern Flame country. Countless monstrous geniuses fought tooth and nail to enter. But every year, only 200 or so people from the entire Northern Flame country could enter the Imperial Courtyard. It could be said that entering the Northern Flame Imperial Courtyard was a kind of honor, a symbol. But now, someone had shattered their badge and was planning to leave the Imperial Courtyard. Lin Tian stared at Zhu Wudao and stepped forward. His eyes were frighteningly cold. Halt! Lin Tian, stop. What's the point? Han He and Lu Lan stood in front of him. The two of them had a good impression of Lin Tian and had high hopes for Lin Tian. However, now that Lin Tian was going to kill the Emperor of Beiyin, they couldn't just stand by and watch. He has done something he shouldn't have, Lin Tian said in a cold voice. A cold snort was heard. The spiritual sea realm expert who was swept away by Lin Tian walked back and stared coldly at Lin Tian. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. Just now, he was swept away by this divine pulse cultivator. Seniors, please suppress him, Zhu Wudao said. The elder who rushed back nodded. A vast true inner force rushed out and pressed down on Lin Tian. Lin Tian's face was cold. His heart spiritual sword vibrated, and the thunder fire's sword chi bloomed. Boom! A violent aura rushed out from his body and swept across the land. The onlookers' faces changed. The elder's face changed. He was moved again. Not bad. Lin Tian was only at the 8th heaven of the divine pulse realm, but he was able to release such a terrifying sword aura. It was almost as powerful as a spiritual sea realm expert. The elder couldn't help but be shocked. However, such an aura wasn't enough to make a real spiritual sea realm expert afraid. The elder's feet trembled and rushed toward Lin Tian in an instant. The elder raised his right hand and pressed a palm toward Lin Tian. Arm palm, Han He said in a deep voice. Arm palm was a spiritual sea realm martial technique. It was said that one palm could crush everything. Lin Tian held the heart's spiritual sword and didn't dodge. He met the attack directly. Clang! With an ear-piercing whistle, he swung his sword at the old man, colliding with the old man's palm. Instantly, violent true inner force swept out in all directions, shaking many of the onlookers and forcing them to retreat. "Traitor, submit to the law," the elder shouted. "Get lost!" Lin Tian's voice was cold. The heart's spiritual sword in his hand became more terrifying, and the thunder fire sword chi was more frightening. With a clang, the two separated and collided again. Streams of true inner force collided with each other. Tornadoes swept up in all directions. Such a terrifying aura made many onlookers back again, fearing that they would be hurt by the fluctuations. He can actually block a spiritual sea realm expert. Someone was shocked. In the arena, every sword strike of Lin Tian's carried the power of thunder and fire, as if there was a thunder and fire dragon roaring. The kind of berserk sword aura was shocking to hear, completely blocking the sea of knowledge old man's palm, not falling behind in the slightest. Han He and Lu Lan stared at the center of the field and couldn't help but clench their fists. Such a young man, only 16 years old, had already reached the 8th heaven of the divine pulse. Moreover, with such a cultivation, his combat strength was already so strong that he could barely contend with an expert of the sea of consciousness realm. What kind of monster was this? What kind of genius was this? In the history of Northern Flame Imperial Courtyard, when did it have such an outstanding disciple? "Seniors, please join forces," Zhu Wudao said. Han's face was gloomy. The old general has served the country all his life. This young man is a rare peerless genius in Northern Flame Country. His future is limitless. "Your Highness, why do you have to do this?" Zhu Wudao's face was cold. "Don't forget, the two of you can be where you are today because of the late Emperor's grace." Han He and Lu Lan were shocked. Indeed, if the previous Emperor of Northern Flame Country did not give them some treasures and martial techniques, it would be difficult for them to reach the spiritual sea realm. "Forget it." Lu Lan sighed and stepped forward. Han He shook his head and followed Lu Lan to press down on Lin Tian. "Lin Tian, I'm sorry," Lu Lan said. Lu Lan waved his palm and pressed down on Lin Tian. "I'm sorry," Han He said. As he said that, Han He also struck out his palm and pressed down on Lin Tian. Their strongest moves were the saber and the sword respectively. However, how could they use their saber and sword against Lin Tian? In fact, they admired Lin Tian from the bottom of their hearts. How could an ordinary person do this? Lin Tian was expressionless. He was not affected by Han He and Lu Lan's pressure at all. "Whoever stops me is an enemy," he said indifferently. With a clang, the thunder flame sword trembled and slashed out a sky full of sword energy. "Insolence!" the spiritual sea realm old man in white shouted. He waved his full arm palm. Instantly, the sky was full of palm prints. Lin Tian held the heart spirit sword. With one strike, 10,000 swords were born. The sword wind swept in all directions. Swoosh! 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 The sky full of palm prints were all shattered. Lin Tian shook the heart spirit sword and slashed out 3 thunder flame sword rays. The inner spirit sword was a lower grade ultimate treasure, which increased his battle strength by about 80%. Coupled with his original cultivation of the 8th heaven of the divine range, it could be said that his current battle strength was completely comparable to an expert in the early stage of the Sea of Consciousness realm. He's just in the divine pulse realm. How can he be so strong? Is he a freak? Many people were shocked. Zhang Runwen had retreated far away. At this moment, he stared at the scene with an extremely ugly expression. Damn it! In the Imperial City, there was someone in the same generation who had surpassed him. The sound of swords resounded through the 9 heavens. The fist shadows and palm lights were also intertwined. The 4 people fought together and destroyed the entire street of the Imperial City. "Break!" the white-haired old man shouted and pressed a palm print on Lin Tian's arm. Lin Tian coughed up blood, but at the same time, he also slashed out a sword, leaving a bloody mark on the white-haired old man's chest. The white-haired old man was angry, and his attacks became more violent. Han He and Lu Lan also attacked together. The three spiritual sea realm experts joined forces. No matter how strong Lin Tian was, he was still at a disadvantage. After a while, he was hit by the white-haired old man's palm and staggered back several feet. "Little brother, stop!" Ji Yuanshan came forward. Lin Tian's tyrannical strength shocked Ji Yuanshan. Now that he saw Lin Tian injured, Ji Yuanshan was incomparably worried. With three Sea of Soul realm experts attacking together, it was impossible for Lin Tian to block them. "You go," Ji Yuanshan said to Lin Tiandao. Ji Yuanshan believed that if Lin Tian wanted to leave, no one here could stop him. "Go? Where should I go?" Lin Tian pushed Ji Yuanshan away and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He stared coldly at Zhu Wudao. "I swear, I will kill you. If I don't kill you, how can I face her?" Facing Lin Tian's eyes, Zhu Wudao frowned, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. "Three seniors, suppress him. Elder Han, Elder Lu, don't show mercy to a traitor," Zhu Wudao said coldly. Sitting on the warhorse, Zhu Wudao's expression was indifferent. The white-haired old man nodded, and the aura on his body suddenly rose. Han He and Lu Lan sighed and stared at Lin Tian, shaking their heads. "After today, I will feel guilty for the rest of my life," Han He said. The two looked at Lin Tian, and the aura on their bodies began to vibrate. A blade and a sword appeared at the same time. Suddenly, three Sea of Consciousness realm true essence exploded, shaking all directions. At this moment, the three of them unleashed a special power, divine sense power. Once this power was unleashed, it made the three of them seem much taller. Lin Tian was only a few feet away from the three of them. He was blown by this aura until the black hair on his forehead fluttered. However, his expression did not change from beginning to end. It was still cold. Boom! He raised the inner spirit sword and pointed it straight at the sword. The power of thunder and fire spread all over his body. His aura also began to rise sharply. In an instant, four powerful auras collided, causing everyone's heart to tremble. This kind of aura was too terrifying. Three Sea of Consciousness realm old fellows fighting a divine pulse realm young man. Really cough shameless. A voice sounded from the side. The four auras were obviously very strong, but this voice clearly transmitted into everyone's ears. Not far away, a middle-aged man staggered over. The man held a wine gourd in his hand. His hair was as messy as Ji Yuanshan's at this moment, like a beggar. Chapter 190. Lin Tian tilted his head and frowned. He seemed to have seen this middle-aged man somewhere before. Full text to read. He frowned and thought for a moment. Suddenly, a faint light flashed in his eyes. "It's you," he said in a low voice. Back then, on the streets of the imperial city, Lung Feng led the Lung family's experts to assassinate him. At that time, he saved a middle-aged drunkard from a rain of arrows. It was this man. The middle-aged drunkard stared at Lin Tian and laughed. "Little brother, do you have any wine?" "No, and I don't like it," Lin Tiandao said. As he spoke, he tilted his head and looked at Han He and the other two. "Don't!" The middle-aged drunkard leaned forward and hooked his arm around Lin Tian's neck. "You treat me to wine, and I help you fight. How about it? Fair, right?" "No need." Lin Tiandao. The middle-aged drunkard was stunned. He took a big gulp of wine and gave a thumbs up. "You have character. I like it." As he spoke, the middle-aged drunkard retreated and sat down on the side of the street. Drinking wine and watching a show is a joy in life, the middle-aged drunkard said drunkenly. Many onlookers stared at the middle-aged drunkard and shook their heads. This guy drinks so much that he lost his eyesight. He actually dares to stick to the battlefield at this time. There are really people who aren't afraid of death. That's why it's better to drink in moderation. If you drink too much, you might not even know how you died. Someone muttered. Han He and the other two glanced at the middle-aged drunkard, then looked back at Lin Tian. Lin Tian, stop. It's not too late to stop now. We'll plead for you. Hani said. Lulan also stared at Lin Tian. Neither of them wanted Lin Tian to die here. Lin Tian was expressionless. The inner spirit sword was surrounded by the light of thunder and fire. He pointed it straight ahead. If I don't kill him, I'm not a man, he said coldly. Zhu Wudao felt Lin Tian's murderous intent, and his face darkened. The white-haired old man grunted coldly and said, Honey, why waste your breath on this bastard? Take him down. With that, the white-haired old man rushed over. Buzz! The full arm palm struck out, and immediately, a dense number of palm prints appeared in the air, overlapping one another. Lin Tian raised his hand. The inner spirit sword trembled, and boundless sword light swept out. The two of them clashed again, palm and sword colliding continuously. It had to be said that a sea of consciousness realm expert was extraordinary. The white-haired old man used his full arm palm to repeatedly collide with the inner spirit sword. Unexpectedly, his palm was not damaged in the slightest, as if it was forged from diamond. It was frightening. Lin Tian drew his sword with a backhand grip and spun it out in a slash. With a clang, a spiral fire sword rain formed. Lin Tian leaned to the side and slashed at the white-haired old man. This attack caused the expressions of many people to change. This is a blind spot. What a crafty attack. Many martial artists were shocked. This sword seemed simple, but it was difficult to dodge. Many people believed that if they were in his shoes, they would definitely be stabbed. In the distance, Han He and Lu Lan looked at this sword and were somewhat stunned. The white-haired old man was slightly surprised, as if he was also shocked by this sword. However, in the next moment, the old man snorted coldly. His body twisted and made a very strange movement, barely avoiding this sword. Break! The white-haired old man raised his hand and pressed a palm towards Lin Tian. Lin Tian retreated quickly. The inner spirit sword was held horizontally in front of his chest, blocking the white-haired old man's palm. With a clang, he retreated a dozen steps. His arm was slightly numb. Staring at the white-haired old man again, the cold light in his eyes became more intense. The power of thunder and fire on the inner spirit sword became stronger. Petty tricks? You think you can deal with a sea of consciousness realm expert? The white-haired old man said coldly. The sword move just now was indeed terrifying and difficult to dodge. Anyone under the sea of consciousness realm would probably die. However, a sea of consciousness realm expert was different. A sea of consciousness realm expert had the power of consciousness. This power could capture some attack trajectories, so they could avoid it more effectively. As he spoke, the white-haired old man pressed on towards Lin Tian again. Lin Tian was expressionless. The inner spirit sword was pointed straight ahead. The white-haired old man snorted coldly. He was very dissatisfied with Lin Tian's attitude. His footsteps stopped, and he shot out. His palms waved repeatedly, striking out a sky full of divine light palm prints. It seemed to shatter the air and seal all directions. Lin Tian stepped forward. The inner spirit sword shook and swept out a sky full of sword energy. Clang, clang, clang. The white-haired old man's full arm palm was very strong. His hands were forged like steel, difficult to be injured by swords and sabers. At this time, the white-haired old man's palm and Lin Tian's inner spirit sword collided, producing a clanging sound. Void palm! Suddenly, the white-haired old man shouted coldly. Looking at this palm, many people were shocked. This palm was very similar to the sword strike Lin Tian had just made. It was also an attack from a blind spot. It was very difficult to avoid. Oh no! Someone shook his head. Lin Tian naturally felt a great threat as he stared at the white-haired old man's palm. However, his expression remained calm from start to finish. At this moment, the divine one-soul incantation began to circulate wildly. His powerful soul power instantly spread out, causing his perception of his surroundings to reach a critical point. When he looked at the white-haired old man's palm again, it became incomparably clear. It was also at this critical juncture that Lin Tian did not dodge. He raised his left hand and swung it out from the side. He actually grabbed the wrist of the white-haired old man's arm that had swung out and firmly held it in place like a pair of pliers. "You!" The white-haired old man was shocked. His palm was blocked just like that. At this moment, the inner spirit sword in Lin Tian's right hand vibrated, producing an ear-piercing sound as it slashed down from above. "Damn it!" The white-haired old man's expression changed drastically. At the same time, Zhu Wudao shouted, "Elder Han, Elder Lu, what are you waiting for?" Han He and Lu Lan had no choice but to rush forward and slash down with their swords and sabers. Lin Tian's sword was about to land on the white-haired old man's body, but at this moment, Han He and Lu Lan's saber light and sword light rushed over, forcing his sword to change direction. He changed his slash into a whip to meet Han He and Lu Lan's saber light and sword light. At the same time, he leaned back and kicked the white-haired old man's abdomen. With a bang, the white-haired old man was sent flying. At the same time, Lin Tian also retreated rapidly, dodging several meters away. Lin Tian tilted his head and stared at Han He and Lu Lan. His gaze became even colder. "Sorry." Han He shook his head. Lu Lan sighed as well. The saber in his hand emitted specks of saber light. At this moment, the surrounding onlookers were all stunned. They were stunned by how Lin Tian had broken the white-haired old man's killing blow. How did he avoid it? He doesn't have divine sense? Could it be his innate spiritual sense? How is that possible? If his innate spiritual sense is comparable to divine sense, then what will happen when he enters the sea of consciousness realm? Many people's hearts palpitated. Not far away, on the side of the road, the middle-aged drunkard stared at Lin Tian with a gleam in his eyes. He really is a little monster. After muttering to himself, the middle-aged drunkard began to gulp down more liquor. The white-haired old man stood up from afar. His face was a little ugly and livid. Bastard. He was a dignified sea of consciousness realm expert, but he was actually sent flying by a divine vein realm cultivator. This was truly a disgrace. 3 elders, please work together to suppress this traitor, Zhu Wudao shouted. The white-haired old man naturally didn't need to say this because he had already rushed out at the first moment. Han He and Lu Lan sighed and also went to meet Lin Tian. Lin Tian raised his head and stared at Zhu Wudao. His eyes were full of cold, killing intent. Whoosh! He rushed towards the 3 like a ray of light. Then he raised his left hand and threw out a punch. Suddenly, a dazzling fist light exploded from his fist. It was extremely powerful and rushed towards the 3 elders. Nirvana fist? Han He was shocked. The white-haired old man snorted and slapped his palm down. With a swoosh, Lin Tian's Nirvana fist was shattered by the palm. After all, the white-haired old man was a true sea of consciousness realm expert. Although the Nirvana fist was terrifying, it was not enough to threaten a sea of consciousness realm expert. However, in the next moment, the white-haired old man rushed towards Lin Tian. His face changed. Where is he? The white-haired old man was shocked. At the same time, the other onlookers were also shocked. Lin Tian's figure had completely disappeared at this moment. Han He and Lu Lan stared ahead and suddenly remembered Lin Tian's other movement technique. Their faces changed. The 2 of them used their divine sense at almost the same time. Then, they both retreated and rushed towards Zhu Wudao. Clang! Han He attacked and slashed in Zhu Wudao's direction. This action made everyone's face change color. What is he doing? What? Seeing Han He attack the new king, Zhu Wudao, all the onlookers were shocked. Zhu Wudao's face also changed. He shouted, Elder Han, what are you doing? As he spoke, Zhu Wudao was about to dodge. At this moment, the white-haired old man shouted, Your Highness, don't move. That traitor is approaching you. As he spoke, the white-haired old man took a step towards Zhu Wudao. Zhu Wudao suddenly remembered that Lin Tian seemed to be able to hide his body temporarily in demonic beast ridge. He suddenly understood. With a clang, Han He's sword chi arrived, brushing past Zhu Wudao's chest and slashing into the air, emitting a crisp clang. Then, almost at the same time, Lin Tian's figure appeared in front of Zhu Wudao. The heart-soul sword was in front of his chest, blocking Han He's sword light. Die! The white-haired old man rushed over and pressed down with a palm. The violent palm force shook all directions. This palm, the white-haired old man used all of his strength. Lin Tian attracted the three people's attention with the Nirvana fist. Then, he approached Zhu Wudao with the Gale Mark. Originally, he wanted to kill Zhu Wudao secretly, but he underestimated a sea of consciousness realm powerhouse's divine sense power. His tracks were discovered in an instant. At this moment, he blocked Han He's sword chi with the Heart-Soul sword. He was powerless to counterattack the white-haired old man's powerful palm. Even avoiding it was difficult. Lin Tian's, Ji Yuanshan's face changed. Han He's hand holding the long sword suddenly tightened. His face showed some struggle, and his eyes were full of regret. The crowd stared at this scene, and their faces all became gloomy. "It's over," someone murmured. In all fairness, almost 90% of the people in this place admired Lin Tian. They did not wish for Lin Tian to die here. But this scene now, who could stop it? It was also at this time that loud laughter sounded. "Good, good, good. What a little evildoer." In the distance, the middle-aged drunkard stood up. The crowd looked in that direction and suddenly felt a blur in front of their eyes. The middle-aged drunkard's figure actually disappeared silently. Then, in the next moment, a blood-curdling scream sounded. The white-haired old man who attacked Lin Tian vomited blood and was sent flying. The middle-aged drunkard stood in front of Lin Tian and was drinking hard liquor. Chapter 191. A beautiful blood-red color floated in the air as the white-haired old man was sent flying. Everyone's eyes widened. That drunkard? When did he go there? Heavens, could he be a high-level expert? Many people were shocked. The middle-aged drunkard stood in front of Lin Tian and gulped down a mouthful of wine before wiping his mouth. Awesome! Only then did the white-haired old man land on a small stall dozens of feet away with a bang. He struggled a few times but was unable to get up. In the end, he fainted. Lin Tian stared at the middle-aged drunkard, his heart also shocked. Just now, even he didn't clearly see how this drunkard appeared in front of him. "Thank you, senior." After a pause, Lin Tiandao said. In any case, Lin Tian knew that it was the drunkard who saved him. Otherwise, even if he did not die, he would have lost a layer of skin. The middle-aged drunkard turned around and patted Lin Tian's shoulder. He was so drunk that he could not even stand properly. He hooked his arm around Lin Tian's neck and said with a breath reeking of alcohol, "Little guy, now you know the difference between us. After all, you're only in the divine vein realm. You have no chance of winning if you want to kill someone under the nose of 3 spiritual sea realm cultivators." Lin Tian was silent and glanced at Han He and Lu Lan. He held the inner spirit sword in his right hand and could not help but tighten his grip. Indeed, 3 spiritual sea realm cultivators wanted to protect Zhu Wudao. He had no chance to make a move. The middle-aged drunkard chuckled. In the next moment, Lin Tianji felt his vision blur, and the two of them appeared beside Ji Yuanshan. "It's not bad to save one person first, right?" the middle-aged drunkard said. While saying this, the drunkard did not forget to pour wine into his mouth. At this time, everyone was shocked by the scene in front of them and stared at the middle-aged drunkard in unison. "This seems to be a peerless expert." Someone stared. Han He and Lu Lan were surprised, but at the same time, they felt a little relieved. After all, they did not want anything to happen to Lin Tian. "Little brother, are you okay?" Ji Yuanshan looked at Lin Tiandao. "I'm fine." Lin Tian shook his head. Ji Yuanshan was completely relieved. Only now did he have the time to size up the middle-aged drunkard. His face was also filled with shock. The middle-aged drunkard continued to drink and suddenly sighed. "It's almost gone." Shaking his wine gourd, the middle-aged drunkard was a little worried. In the distance, Zhu Wudao looked at the middle-aged drunkard and said in a low voice, "Senior, The Northern Flame Country is here to suppress the traitors. Please do not obstruct us. Later, I will order people to bring you endless wine and let you drink to your heart's content." The middle-aged drunkard raised his head to look at Zhu Wudao and curled his lips. "Drinking depends on the person. You little brat, the wine you give won't have any taste," the middle-aged drunkard said calmly. Zhu Wudao's face suddenly turned somewhat ugly. The middle-aged drunkard glanced at Jiang Runwen in the distance, but he still had his arm around Lin Tian's neck. He said, "Little guy, let's go. I won't help you kill people. You can't kill them yourself now. Well, since we have already saved one, why don't we find a place to talk? After all, you also need to recover your Zhen Yuan, right?" The middle-aged drunkard yawned, looking like he was dead drunk. Lin Tian's heart slightly froze. He seriously glanced at the middle-aged drunkard. He fought 3 CE of consciousness experts with his 8 sky of divine range cultivation base. The consumption of his Zhen Yuan was naturally very frightening. At this time, it was almost empty. To be honest, if he continued to fight now, the result would only get worse and worse. He was just a little surprised that the middle-aged drunkard could see through his current state at a glance. He raised his head and looked at Zhu Wudao, killing intent intertwined in his eyes. He held the hilt of the inner spirit sword tightly. "A good man will always have a chance," the middle-aged drunkard said. Lin Tian stared at Zhu Wudao. His long sword flashed and was kept in the stone ring. "I will definitely kill you." Looking at Zhu Wudao, his words were as cold as frost, making everyone's heart tremble. Zhu Wudao's face was very ugly. His face was ashen as he pulled the reins tightly. On the other side, Jiang Renwen's expression was even more unsightly. Now, not only was he no match for Lin Tian, it was even to the extent that Lin Tian had practically completely forgotten about him and didn't care about him at all. This caused his pride to suffer an unprecedented blow. "Damn it, beast!" Holding the precious sword, Jiang Renwen's face was frighteningly ferocious. Seeing Lin Tian put away the long sword, the middle-aged drunkard laughed. "Enjoy the wine and watch the show. Sit and wait for the next show." The middle-aged drunkard laughed. As he spoke, everyone only felt a blur in front of their eyes. The middle-aged drunkard, Lin Tian, and Ji Yuanshan's figures instantly disappeared from everyone's sight. No one saw how the 3 moved. My God, where did this peerless expert come from? It's a little scary. Many people's hearts trembled. Previously, everyone thought that the middle-aged drunkard was just an ordinary drunkard. They never thought that this drunkard was actually such a terrifying existence. That Lin Tian, there's actually such a strong expert behind him? Someone was shocked. At this moment, the streets of the imperial city fell into a deathly silence. Zhu Wudao's expression became incomparably gloomy. He paraded Ji Yuanshan through the streets with the identity of the new king, wanting to execute him in public. But he did not expect that Lin Tian, who was supposed to be dead, actually jumped out at this time and ruined everything. Lung Feng was dead, Duan Wenbao was dead, and Ji Yuanshan was also taken away. This was simply a ruthless slap to his face. "Elder Han, Elder Liu, the 2 of you command the Imperial Courtyard experts to move out and find the whereabouts of that traitor. Once you find him, immediately inform me and invite a few Knowledge Sea experts. We must kill him," Zhu Wudao said in a deep voice. Han He and Lu Lan stared at Zhu Wudao, their faces slightly gloomy. "Your Highness, why do you have to do this?" Lu Lan said. Zhu Wudao's face darkened. "Elder Liu, don't forget. Enough." Lu Lan interrupted Zhu Wudao and said, "The late emperor was indeed kind to the 2 of us, but just now, the 2 of us also saved your highness's life, which is considered a little too low. After this, we will not act against Lin Tian and will only stay in the imperial courtyard. Of course, if your highness wants to expel us from the imperial courtyard, feel free to do so." Lu Lan and Han He looked at each other and turned to leave at the same time. Just now, the 2 of them had already felt guilty for acting against Lin Tian. After all, Lin Tian did not do anything wrong. He was completely righteous. The 2 of them weren't senile. nor were they evil people. Even if they couldn't be biased towards such a young man who valued friendship and righteousness, they would absolutely not obstruct him or even cut off his future path. That would make them feel guilty for the rest of their lives. Watching Han He and Lu Lan leave, many of the onlookers were shocked. Many people stared at Zhu Wudao and secretly shook their heads. Although no one dared to say anything, right and wrong were in the hearts of the people. Damn it! Zhu Wudao's expression became incomparably gloomy and frighteningly cold. Far away, on a street, an old man, a middle-aged man, and a young man walked side by side. "Is there a quieter place?" the middle-aged drunkard asked. At this moment, the middle-aged drunkard still had his arm around Lin Tian's neck. Lin Tian hesitated for a moment, then looked at Ji Yuanshan. Ji Yuanshan sighed. "Let's go there." Not long after, the three of them arrived in front of a huge mansion. It was the general's residence. There was a wooden fence outside the general's residence. Perhaps because Ji Yuanshan was parading through the streets today, there were no soldiers guarding this place. Thus, the three of them easily walked in. Whoosh! Snow drifted in the wind. As they walked into the courtyard, the faint smell of blood assailed their nostrils. The middle-aged drunkard looked ahead. Oh, how tragic! Corpses were strewn all over the courtyard. There were young men, young maidservants, old women, and even a few little girls. Ji Yuanshan's body was trembling. In an instant, he seemed to have aged a lot. His entire body was trembling. "Old General, my condolences," Lin Tian said. Ji Yuanshan's eyes were filled with tears, but he held them back. "There's an empty room inside. Little brother, take this man there. I'll be right outside," Ji Yuanshan said. Lin Tian naturally understood Ji Yuanshan's feelings. After a slight pause, he nodded. Soon, he brought the middle-aged drunkard to a guest room. As soon as he entered the room, he sat down cross-legged and began to circulate the four extreme scripture to recover his true yuan. "Why are you cultivating as soon as you come in? Didn't we agree to have a chat?" The middle-aged drunkard was dissatisfied. "I still have something to do." Lin Tian Ondao. The middle-aged drunkard chuckled and sat down. "I heard everything just now. You said something about returning her to me. What's wrong, little guy? Was your little lover taken away by someone else? Are you in a hurry?" Lin Tian's body trembled. Suddenly, a chill spread out. In an instant, a wooden table in the room was shattered into pieces by the formless sword chi. The middle-aged drunkard looked frightened and said, "I was just saying, don't emit such a fierce sword chi." Lin Tian didn't say anything. How could this person be frightened? "Don't you want to know who I am?" the middle-aged drunkard said. Lin Tian circulated the four extreme scripture and said, "Who are you?" The middle-aged drunkard was stunned and then laughed. "What an interesting little guy. Me? You can call me an old drunkard." As he said that, the middle-aged drunkard began to drink again. "Old? You don't look old." "Is that so? Thank you for your praise. But I've lived for more than 150 years. The middle-aged drunkard said. Lin Tian frowned and stared at the middle-aged drunkard. While the man looked a bit sloppy, judging from his face, he looked to be in his 40s at most. There was no trace of him having lived for more than 150 years. It was worth noting that while warriors had a much longer lifespan than ordinary people, time would still leave many traces on one's face. Even if a warrior were to live for more than 150 years, wrinkles would definitely appear on his face. He shouldn't look like this middle-aged man. Staring at Lin Tian, the middle-aged drunkard smirked. Didn't anyone tell you that when a warrior reaches the airborne realm, their lifespan will undergo a qualitative change for the first time, reaching a maximum of 500 years? Because of this, their aging will naturally be delayed. As he said that, the middle-aged man's body floated up on its own. As such, we have no choice but to release the VP chapters the day after tomorrow. Chapter 192. Staring at the middle-aged drunkard, Lin Tian's face was filled with surprise, and his four extremities scripture also stopped. The middle-aged drunkard was actually floating in the air with his own strength. Lin Tian was a little shocked. It was the first time he had seen someone doing this with their own strength. You shouldn't be surprised that someone in the airborne realm can fly, right? The middle-aged drunkard said. As he spoke, the middle-aged drunkard landed on the ground again. It's just the first time I've seen it. Lin Tian was telling the truth. The middle-aged drunkard laughed. Little guy, you're so honest. As he spoke, the middle-aged drunkard stared at Lin Tian, took a sip of wine, and said, Little guy, guess where I'm from? Lin Tian stared at the middle-aged drunkard, his face not looking very good. Sex, he said. The middle-aged drunkard was stunned, and then laughed. You're so smart. An old drunkard like me won't keep you in suspense. Lin Tian snorted and didn't reply. Hey, little guy, what's wrong? Looking at your expression, you seem to have a lot of opinions about sections. The middle-aged drunkard said. Lin Tian smiled and didn't want to say anything more. Is it because of that little bastard from the Jiang family? The middle-aged drunkard said again. Lin Tian operated his four-extremity scripture and said, You know a lot. Because of Jiang Runwen and the other people's attitude toward Jiang Runwen, he really didn't have a good impression of sections. Of course, I know a lot of things. That day on the streets, you actually saved an ordinary drunkard from a rain of arrows. I have to say that it really piqued my interest. You have to know that normal people wouldn't do that at that time. The middle-aged drunkard said, At that time, I began to secretly pay attention to you. Then, ha 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 ha, I suddenly felt that it was fate that you saved me. After taking another sip of wine, the middle-aged drunkard continued, Good boy, you're only 16 years old, but you're actually a third-stage array manipulator. You could almost kill Jiang Renwen, who was at the peak of the divine range. You could escape from the encirclement again and again, and you could even refine the fire crystal under the cliff. Lin Tian was shocked. This middle-aged drunkard actually knew about what happened at the bottom of the cliff. During that month, he didn't sense any human aura nearby. Didn't I say that I've been secretly watching you? So, after that, I know most of what happened to you. As for you not being able to detect my aura, that is normal. Even a sea of consciousness realm cultivator cannot do that. Not to mention a divine vein realm cultivator like you. Don't even think about it. The middle-aged drunkard said, Speaking of which, I accompanied you for an entire month at the bottom of that cliff. Don't you feel moved? What is your purpose? Lin Tian asked. The middle-aged drunkard stared at him like this. He definitely wouldn't believe that it was just a moment of interest. He recalled that the sword mark in his right hand was not exposed. The middle-aged drunkard was at a loss for words, and then he couldn't help but laugh dryly. Little guy, you're really smart. As he spoke, the middle-aged drunkard moved closer to Lin Tian and said, That, little guy, are you interested in becoming my disciple and following me to the sect to cultivate? Lin Tian frowned. This is your purpose? The middle-aged drunkard nodded without hesitation. Yes. Staring at Lin Tian, the middle-aged drunkard rubbed his hands, and his eyes actually lit up. After these days of observation, he found that this young man in front of him could be called perfect in every aspect. Not only was his perception extremely high, but he also cultivated the art of controlling formations. If he could accept such a disciple, his life would definitely not be in vain. Lin Tian was silent. He was naturally willing to go to the sect to cultivate. After all, the Northern Flame Imperial Academy no longer had any value for him to stay, and it couldn't help him improve anymore. What is the sect you are in? He asked. The middle-aged drunkard was overjoyed. Without any arrogance, he quickly ran over and hooked his arm around Lin Tian's neck. Burning Sun Sect, one of the four great sects in this layer of heaven. The middle-aged drunkard said. Lin Tian's sharp senses caught something. This layer of heaven? One of the four great sects? The middle-aged drunkard smiled, moved his arm away from Lin Tian's neck, and sat opposite Lin Tian. At this time, the drunkard's expression became slightly more serious, and he said, Little guy, how much do you know about this world? Lin Tian frowned and said, Northern Flame Country, other empires and sections. That's it? An old drunkard asked. That's it. Lin Tian ondao. The middle-aged drunkard shook his head. With a wave of his right hand, a piece of white paper and a writing brush suddenly appeared. Staring at Lin Tian, he held the writing brush and drew 10 ellipses on the white paper from bottom to top. Then he stopped and pointed at the ellipse at the bottom and said, "This is the world we are in now." Lin Tian frowned. "This?" The middle-aged man waved his hand, motioning Lin Tian not to speak. Holding the writing brush, he drew a dot at the bottom of the ellipse and said, "This small dot is Northern Flame Country." Then, the middle-aged man continued to draw small dots in the ellipse and said, "As for these, they are other empires." Then the middle-aged man drew 4 small circles in the ellipse in the north, south, east, and west and said, "These 4 small circles are the 4 great sections." Lin Tian stared at the ellipse and found that there were at least 100 small black dots. He asked, "According to what you said at the beginning, the first small black dot represents Northern Flame Country, and the other small black dots are empires. So, you mean in this world, there are at least 100 empires like Northern Flame Country?" The middle-aged drunkard smiled and said, "More or less." Lin Tian frowned and was a little surprised. Although he knew that there were other empires in this world besides Northern Flame Country, he did not expect there to be so many. Compared to this world, Northern Flame Country is just a small place. In this world, there are more than 500 empires like Northern Flame Country. The middle-aged drunkard said. Lin Tian was surprised again. More than 500? There were so many? The middle-aged drunkard pointed at the 4 small circles at the bottom of the ellipse and said, "And there are only 4 sects in this world. They are the 7 Mysteries Pavilion, the Valley of the Harp, the 100 Refinement Square, and my Burning Sun sect." Simply put, the 4 great sects do not usually show themselves in the secular world, but they are at the top of this world. So that's how it is. Lin Tian muttered to himself and was slightly shocked. After a pause, his eyes suddenly stared at the 9 ellipses at the top and said, "Then, what do you mean by drawing these 9 ellipses?" The middle-aged drunkard nodded and expressed his appreciation for Lin Tian's sharp mind. "I asked you before, how much do you know about this world?" The middle-aged drunkard smiled. Lin Tian frowned and said, "This world? 500 empires for great sections. Didn't you just say that?" The middle-aged drunkard smiled and shook his head and said, "Little guy, don't limit yourself to a small world. I'm talking about the whole world." Lin Tian frowned and said, "What do you mean?" Staring at the 9 ellipses, his eyes revealed a trace of shock. The middle-aged drunkard nodded with satisfaction and said with a smile, "You guessed right." As he spoke, the middle-aged drunkard pointed at the 9 ovals above and said to Lin Tian, "I've drawn 10 ovals. Here, every single one of them is a large world. From bottom to top, these large worlds will become increasingly vast and expansive." Lin Tian was shocked by the middle-aged drunkard's words. The middle-aged drunkard pointed at the 10 ellipses from bottom to top and said, "Now, I will give you a summary. The 10 ellipses I have drawn, each ellipse represents a heaven domain, and each heaven domain is a large world. Ever since ancient times, cultivators had called the 10 heavenly realms the combination of the 10 heavenly realms. As for us, we are now at the lowest level, the first heaven domain." Saying this, the middle-aged drunkard didn't forget to take another sip of strong wine. "Refreshing," the middle-aged drunkard said. Lin Tian stared at the 10 ellipses and couldn't help but be shocked. 10 directions, heaven domain. He muttered to himself. Today he finally understood this large world. So it was like this. He was now in the lowest first heaven domain of the 10 directions heaven domain. After a pause, he looked at the middle-aged drunkard and asked, "10 directions heaven domain. Each heaven domain is a large world. Then, how do you go from the first heaven domain to the second heaven domain, and from the second heaven domain to the third heaven domain?" Now that he was in the first heaven domain, he would naturally think about how to enter the second heaven domain. After all, looking at the 10 ellipses drawn by an old drunkard, there didn't seem to be a passage between each other. "Good question." The middle-aged drunkard gave Lin Tian a thumbs up and said, "10 directions heaven domain. Each heaven domain is connected by an ancient space-time portal. As long as you have enough strength, You can go through this portal to reach the next heaven domain. Saying this, the middle-aged drunkard revealed a mouthful of snow-white teeth. Of course, if you don't have enough strength and forcefully jump in, you might be killed by that space-time portal. What kind of strength is needed to pass through? Lin Tian asked. Generally speaking, having a sea of knowledge cultivation is enough. The middle-aged drunkard said. Generally speaking? Lin Tian had a strange look on his face. Little guy, you're always so sharp to catch the loopholes in other people's words. It's not cute at all. The middle-aged drunkard rolled his eyes, and then said, Many years ago, there was a problem with the space-time portal between the first heaven domain and the second heaven domain. Originally, a sea of knowledge cultivation was enough to pass through that portal and reach the second heaven domain, and then embark on the stronger path of martial arts. But later, for some reason, even airborne realm experts found it difficult to pass through. I saw an airborne realm expert jump in and was directly crushed into pieces. Lin Tian frowned. There was such a thing. In that case, wouldn't the people in this heaven domain never be able to enter the second heaven domain? Lin Tian asked. According to the middle-aged drunkard, the second heaven domain was vaster and more powerful than the first heaven domain. In other words, entering the higher heaven domain would allow a warrior to go further on the path of cultivation. After coming to this world, Lin Tian's goal was to go to the extreme on the path of martial arts. If he couldn't reach the upper heaven domain, he would be very disappointed. You can't say that. If you surpass the airborne realm, you should be able to pass through 100%, the middle-aged drunkard said casually. Chapter 193. Lin Tianyi was shocked. Surpassing the airborne realm? Are there really other realms after the airborne realm? He had heard Mu Qing and the others mention the realms after the airborne realm, but even Mu Qing and the others didn't know what the realms after that were. They only vaguely guessed that there were other realms after the airborne realm. At this moment, when he heard the middle-aged drunkard mention surpassing the airborne realm, he suddenly remembered and stared at an old drunkard. Of course, the middle-aged drunkard said. As he spoke, he took another big gulp of liquor. What realms are there? Lin Tian asked. The middle-aged drunkard seemed to like Lin Tian very much, so he didn't hide it and said, On the path of martial arts, the first 4 realms are body refinement, divine pulse, sea of consciousness, and airborne realm. You know these. After these 4 realms, there are 5 other major realms, which are the immortal ascension realm, great path realm, enlightenment realm, nirvana realm, and chaotic realm. Each is divided into 9 small steps. Immortal ascension, great path, enlightenment realm, nirvana realm, and chaotic realm. Lin Tian muttered to himself. The middle-aged drunkard stretched his back and said, after reaching the airborne realm, every time a cultivator reaches a higher realm, their lifespan will increase significantly. According to the ancient records of the Burning Sun sect, those who reach the chaotic realm can live up to 100,000 years. 100,000 years? Lin Tianyi was shocked. Humans could live for 100,000 years? Even for cultivators, he felt that it was too exaggerated. One had to know that birth, aging, illness, and death were the eternal laws of nature. Even though cultivators could make themselves stronger through some cultivation methods and martial skills, in the end, they were still limited to this world. In the end, they were still living beings. For a living being to be able to live for such a long period of time was simply too shocking. The middle-aged drunkard smiled and stared at Lin Tian, saying, Young man, do you know what the ultimate goal of a cultivator is? To be stronger, to be the strongest. Lin Tian Dao. Well, you're right. The middle-aged drunkard nodded. He stared at Lin Tian again and said seriously, Listen well, kid. The ultimate goal of us cultivators is only one word, eternal life. Lin Tianyi was shocked. Immortality? Could humans live forever? The middle-aged drunkard shrugged and said, There was once an unparalleled existence who reached the primal chaos realm and said, The heavens will never collapse, and the earth will never sink. Why should the human race walk towards the end? It's not fair. Lin Tian was silent. He thought for a while, but couldn't say anything. Heaven never collapses. The earth never sinks. Indeed, then why should the human race dejectedly walk towards the end? In history, has anyone ever achieved immortality? He asked. The middle-aged man shook his head and said, all-powerful cultivators want to enter the forest of everlasting life. After all, no one is willing to die. Once dead, there is nothing left. However, in the vast history of time, no one has ever achieved immortality. All of them were drowned in the river of time. The middle-aged drunkard looked up at the sky and said, do you know, kid? There's a legend in the 10 directions heavens that says the 10th heaven contains the mystery of eternal life. As long as one can enter the 10th heaven, he can see the truth of heaven and earth and break free from the river of time to achieve an eternal and indestructible body. Lin Tian looked up at the sky. The 10th heaven. Don't look at it. The 10th heaven does exist, but so far, no one has been able to cross it. The middle-aged drunkard shook his head. Lin Tian didn't care. That level was still too far away from him. Staring at the sky, his eyes suddenly shone brightly. The 10th heaven did exist. Since entering the 10th heaven could lead to eternal life, then he must go and take a look. In this life, his goal was to reach the end of the path of cultivation. Now, he knew that eternal life was the end of this path. The middle-aged drunkard noticed Lin Tian's expression and said, kid, you're showing your ambition. Lin Tian didn't care. He thought for a while and returned to the previous question. You said that there's something wrong with the space-time portal between the first heaven and the last heaven. Maybe only those who surpass the airborne realm can cross it. Surpassing the airborne realm is the connecting immortal realm. Has there ever been a connecting immortal realm expert in this world? Sorry, I haven't heard of it. The middle-aged drunkard shrugged. Lin Tian frowned. He was not very satisfied with the answer. The middle-aged drunkard naturally knew what Lin Tian was thinking about. He patted Lin Tian on the shoulder and said, don't think too much about it. Perhaps the spatial door will return to normal on its own, and then you'll be able to leap through it. Lin Tian glanced at the middle-aged drunkard and didn't bother to say anything. At this time, the middle-aged drunkard rubbed his hands and stared at Lin Tiandao. By the way, kid, what do you think of the thing we talked about just now? Are you interested in worshiping me as your master and following me to the Burning Sun sect to cultivate? Don't worry, the cultivation resources of the Burning Sun sect are absolutely incomparable to those in the secular world. The difference is like heaven and earth. The middle-aged drunkard's eyes lit up. He wasn't willing to let go of such a good seedling. Lin Tian thought for a while and said, okay. He naturally wasn't unwilling to go to the sect to cultivate. He wasn't stupid. Really? The middle-aged drunkard was delighted. Really? Lin Tiandao. Great. The middle-aged drunkard was overjoyed. Lin Tian felt a little strange. Why did it feel like the middle-aged drunkard had picked up a big bargain himself? After thinking for a while, he asked, do I need to be your master? No, no, no. The middle-aged drunkard shook his head. There's no need for that. In the future, don't call me master. It's too cliché. Just call me an old drunkard. I like wine. This name is very intimate. Lin Tian nodded. He didn't like to call people master either. After a pause, he stared at an old drunkard and said, then, do you want to give me a gift? He stared at an old drunkard. An old drunkard smiled. Kid, you want me to overturn the Northern Flame Imperial Palace with you? Lin Tian stared at an old drunkard and didn't comment. All right, kid, don't think about it. I said I won't help you kill people. Of course, if you really want to break into the Imperial Palace, I will at least protect you until the end. An old drunkard shook his head. As he spoke, he raised the gourd in his hand and shook it slightly. Instantly, wine flew out and was held in mid-air by his sword finger. Come on, my good disciple. Open your mouth. Although I won't help you kill people, I still have to give you a gift. I don't drink. Lin Tiandao. Why are you talking so much nonsense? When I ask you to open your mouth, just open it. Swallow it. An old drunkard said. Lin Tian hesitated for a while, but in the end, he still opened his mouth. An old drunkard nodded and raised his sword finger. Instantly, the wine above rushed into Lin Tian's mouth. Swallow it, an old drunkard said. Lin Tian could feel that the wine in his mouth was very spicy. He frowned but still swallowed it. The wine flowed down his throat and into his stomach. Lin Tian felt as if there was a fire burning. His whole face turned red and his whole body was uncomfortable. He was about to say something, but suddenly he felt his body shake and a majestic spiritual energy rushed out. Staring at an old drunkard, he was shocked. I told you this is a gift. My wine is very valuable. Hurry up and refine it. An old drunkard said. Lin Tian nodded. He took a deep breath and quickly operated the 4 extreme scriptures to refine the spiritual energy that suddenly appeared in his body. This spiritual energy had a threatening, burning sensation, which was even more terrifying than fire. However, Lin Tian quickly adapted. After all, he had just refined a fire crystal not long ago, and the power of fire was in his true yuan. Buzz! A faint silver light rushed up. He operated the 4 extreme scriptures and started to build the 9th divine meridian with the vast spiritual energy as the foundation. Suddenly, the whole room was intertwined with a strong wave of energy. An old drunkard sat on the side and stared at Lin Tian with slightly narrowed eyes. This little guy, I don't know what kind of martial arts he is practicing. It's too unusual. This martial arts seems to be more profound than the strongest martial arts of the Burning Sun sect. Strange. Shaking his head, an old drunkard didn't say much. He sat quietly on the side and protected Lin Tian. At this time, the whole imperial city was boiling. The new king of Beiyin personally escorted Ji Yuanshan to parade in the streets, but he was stopped by a 16-year-old boy. He kidnapped Ji Yuanshan from under the eyes of 3 spiritual sea realm experts and killed the future successors of the Lung family and Duan family. This made the royal family lose face, and at the same time, it shocked the whole imperial city. What a monster! In the imperial city, everyone was talking about this matter. On this day, all the major forces in the imperial city were shocked. They didn't expect a 16-year-old boy to do such a thing. This was openly disobeying the royal authority. It could be said that he was making an enemy of the entire Beiyin kingdom. Treasure Loft, Ekinjinye's eyes were shining. A young man, so hot-blooded, worthy of this life. Xian Qingyun was beside him. He was both excited and worried. As expected of my brother-in-law, so handsome. Knowing that Lin Tian was still alive, Xian Qingyun was overjoyed. However, not long after, he heard that Lin Tian kidnapped Ji Yuanshan in front of the new king, Zhu Wudao, and even wanted to kill him. This made Xian Qingyun very worried. Xian Qingyun glanced at Xian Qingyun and shook his head. He didn't say much about the brother-in-law that Xian Qingyun mentioned. He felt that if Lin Tian really got together with Xian Yao, it would definitely be a good thing for the Xian family. Of course, that would depend on Lin Tian being able to survive this storm. How could the royal family be so easy to mess with? On this day, in the imperial city, the Lung family, damn it, bastard. The head of the Lung family roared. First it was Lung Yitong, then it was Lung Feng. Both of his sons were killed by Lin Tian. At this time, the head of the Lung family stared at Lung Feng's corpse with bloodshot eyes. Head of the family, there's news that the little bastard walked into the general's mansion. Someone beside him said. Chapter 194. The head of the Lung family was thoroughly enraged. 2 of his sons had been killed one after another. This time he could not bear no matter what. That bastard must be killed. Staring at Lung Feng's corpse, the head of the Lung family's eyes were bloodshot. Yes, head of the family. Immediately, the person next to him retreated. Almost at the same time, angry roars could be heard from the Duan family. Compared to the head of the Lung family, the head of the Duan family was even more resentful and murderous. One should know that Duan Wenba was ranked 3rd on the honor roll list and was the pride of the Duan family. Gather all the experts and kill. The head of the Duan family roared. Immediately, someone from the Duan family walked down and started to gather the experts in the family. On this day, The two most powerful martial arts families in Beiyin were filled with endless anger. Their hatred for Lin Tian had reached its peak, and they could not wait to swallow Lin Tian alive. However, until now, they had never thought that they were the ones who first made things difficult for Lin Tian and forced Lin Tian to assassinate Lin Tian. That was how they ended up in this situation. In the general's residence, Lin Tian sat cross-legged and channeled the four extremities meridians to refine the spiritual wine in his body. The spiritual wine was very strong, even hotter than fire. However, after refining and absorbing the fire crystal, Lin Tian's true yuan had the power of fire. Naturally, he had a strong resistance to this kind of spiritual wine and was able to control it freely. At this time, he guided the spiritual power in the spiritual wine and gathered it on his ninth divine meridian to refine it carefully. Wang! A faint silver glow lingered on the surface of his body, and then gradually became more powerful. When he was at the bottom of the cliff in Demonic Beast Ridge, he had already built half of his ninth divine meridian. At this time, with the help of the spiritual wine given by an old drunkard, the spiritual power was guided to the ninth divine meridian and to the second half of the ninth divine meridian. This caused the meridians and acupoints in the second half of the ninth divine meridian to be connected. You chose the heart for the last divine meridian. Good choice. Now, take your time. There's no rush. An old drunkard said. With an old drunkard's cultivation, he naturally saw through which divine vein Lin Tian was constructing. Even though Lin Tian was cultivating, he could still hear an old drunkard's voice. Furthermore, he was well aware of the importance of this final divine vein. Thus, he immediately slowed down and carefully connected every single meridian and acupoint, allowing the construction of this divine vein to proceed in an orderly manner. Buzz! Gradually, the silver light around Lin Tian's body became brighter and brighter. About 2 hours later, a rumbling sound rushed out from his body, and a hurricane immediately swept through the room. An old drunkard nodded in satisfaction as he stared at Lin Tian. A few dozen breaths later, Lin Tian opened his eyes. A silver light flashed through his eyes. He stood up and clenched his fists. He felt that his strength had become even more powerful, as if there was an inexhaustible power condensed in his flesh. Purely in terms of true essence and physique, you're now no worse than an early-stage sea of consciousness cultivator. An old drunkard said, "My battle strength won't be bad either." Lin Tiandao. An old drunkard was amused. "Kid, you're really confident. You know, sea of consciousness cultivators cultivate divine sense power. With the help of divine sense power, even if your true essence and physique are comparable to sea of consciousness cultivators, your actual battle strength is still lacking." "I have soul power." Lin Tiandao. An old drunkard was surprised for a moment, then laughed. "I forgot, you're also an array manipulator." After a pause, an old drunkard said, "Thinking about it, when you dodged that crafty palm strike of that old white guy, you relied on the help of soul power, right?" Lin Tian nodded, not denying it. Array manipulator's lineage, a terrifying inheritance. An old drunkard muttered to himself. Lin Tian looked outside the courtyard. Ji Yuanshan was sitting on an old stone, his entire person looking even more aged. After a pause, Lin Tian walked out. "Old general, please restrain your grief. I'll find Zhu Wudao to settle this grudge." Lin Tian arrived in front of Ji Yuanshan. Ji Yuanshan wiped the old tears from the corners of his eyes. Hearing Lin Tian's words, he was suddenly shocked. "Little brother, what are you going to do?" Lin Tian tilted his head, looking in the direction of the imperial palace, a cold light intertwined in his eyes. "She's still under house arrest in the imperial palace. I'm going to bring her back." Lin Tiandao. Ji Yuanshan was shocked. "Don't be reckless. This matter still needs to be considered at length." His only granddaughter was under house arrest. Ji Yuanshan was naturally burning with anxiety, but Ji Yuanshan also knew how terrifying the imperial family was. With Lin Tianyi's individual strength, how could he possibly contend against the entire imperial family? Breaking into the Imperial Palace was undoubtedly seeking death. I don't want to make her wait too long. Lin Tiandao. Saying so, he stepped out of the general's residence. Lin Tian, where are you going? Ji Yuanshan was anxious. Following behind Lin Tian, Ji Yuanshan rushed out of the door. Then he saw Lin Tian stop. Ji Yuanshan wanted to say something, but following Lin Tian's gaze, he saw dozens of powerful cultivators rushing over. The aura they emitted was actually at the divine vein realm. Among them, there were actually quite a few people at the 8th heavenly layer of the divine vein realm. Lung family, Duan family Ji Yuanshan's expression changed slightly. Seeing these two families rushing over, Ji Yuanshan naturally knew why they were here. Old thief Ji, little bastard Lin. Just nice, we'll kill you together. An expert from the Lung family shouted. This was an expert at the 8th heavenly layer of the divine vein realm, a direct descendant of the Lung family. No need to talk nonsense, go. Someone from the Duan family shouted. There were more than 80 cultivators from the Lung family and Duan family who rushed here, and all of them were divine vein realm experts. Therefore, although they knew that Lin Tian could defeat Duan Wenba and Lung Feng, these people were not afraid. One person might be very strong, but when facing dozens of divine vein realm cultivators, even a sea of consciousness realm expert would have to frown. Ji Yuanshan was furious and anxious at the same time. Lin Tian was very strong, but facing so many divine vein realm experts at the same time, what were his chances of winning? Old General, let's go back, Lin Tian said with his back facing Ji Yuanshan. Saying so, he stepped out of the general's residence, as if there was nothing in front of him. Kill! The leader of the Lung family shouted. Suddenly, the experts from the Lung family and Duan family rushed up and attacked Lin Tian. Lin Tian was expressionless as he walked forward step by step. Clang! The sword whistled suddenly, and blood splattered on the spot. Lin Tian took a step forward, and dozens of thunder flame, sword chi swept out around him. In an instant, dozens of people fell to the ground. Looking ahead, his expression did not change at all, and he did not stop at all. Only the long sword in his hand vibrated again. Puff! 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 The sword radiance was dazzling, and thunder flame intertwined. With him as the center, all the cultivators within a radius of 30 feet were killed. In just an instant, 36 divine vein realm cultivators died tragically on the spot. The leader of the Lung family changed his expression, and fear appeared on his face. Those who had come here were the elites of their families. Each and every one of them was a divine vein expert. But now such a scene had occurred. Dozens of them had been killed in an instant. Lin Tian was expressionless, as if he did not see the people around him. He stepped forward calmly. Clang! Another sword whistle rang out, and dense thunder flame, sword chi spread out from the inner spirit sword. Screams rang out as the experts from the Lung family and Duan family, who rushed toward Lin Tian, were all penetrated by the terrifying sword radiance. They could not block this sword radiance at all. In the blink of an eye, more than half of the 80 divine vein realm cultivators from the two families were killed. Only a dozen people were still standing, and they were all trembling in fear. At this time, Lin Tian had only taken a dozen steps forward. Retreat! The Duan family expert shouted. This was a 9th-layer divine vein realm cultivator. No matter what, he did not expect Lin Tian's battle strength to be so terrifying. As he spoke, this person was the first to retreat, fleeing into the distance. Lin Tian's steps were still calm, neither fast nor slow. He raised the long sword in his hand for the first time. Clang! This time, nearly 100 sword radiances bloomed at the same time, sweeping in all directions. Now that he had reached the 9th-layer divine vein realm, his battle strength had increased again. He could compete with sea of consciousness realm cultivators. How could these ordinary divine vein realm cultivators be his opponent? At this moment, for the experts from the Lung family and Duan family who rushed here, it was undoubtedly a devastating disaster. It was equivalent to rushing over to accept their own death, Puff, puff, puff. Blood splattered as if the Grim Reaper was harvesting lives. The cultivators fell to the ground one by one. In the blink of an eye, the outside of the general's mansion was dyed red with blood. Among the 80 people from the Lung family and Duan family, only the 9th layer divine Vein Realm cultivator from the Duan family was still conscious, but he also fell to the ground. Staring at Lin Tian, this person's face was filled with fear. His palm pressed on his bleeding abdomen, and he crawled away like a wild dog. Puff! A sword radiance flashed, and the person's head was directly cut off. Lin Tian's footsteps didn't change at all. His body was stained with blood. He put away the heart-spirit sword and continued to walk forward. Soon, he disappeared into the distance. Ji Yuanshan leaned against the door of the general's mansion and watched this scene. He was so shocked that he couldn't say a word. He had been on the battlefield for dozens of years and had seen all kinds of scenes. However, he had never seen such a one-sided battle. Lin Tian had only taken a dozen steps, and over 80 divine Vein Realm cultivators were all killed. During this process, he didn't even see Lin Tian frown, nor did he see Lin Tian dodge an attack. Heh! An old drunkard stared at the direction Lin Tian left and gulped down his wine. After leaving the general's mansion, Lin Tian walked along the streets of the Imperial City and came to the entrance of the Array Manipulator Guild. Mr. Yu, seeing Lin Tian's appearance, the female attendant was a little scared. There were many other people in the Array Manipulator Guild. After seeing Lin Tian, they were all shocked. Many people subconsciously retreated far away. Lin Tian didn't care about these people's reactions. He walked directly to the Array Manipulator Guild's backyard. During this process, no one dared to stop him. After entering the guild's backyard, Lin Tian walked in a certain direction. Not long after, 3 people walked towards him. It was the Array Manipulator Guild's vice president, Qin Feng. Beside him were Elder Jin and Elder Nye. Seeing the 3 people, Lin Tian stopped. Qin Feng and the others also stopped. A strange light flickered in their eyes. After a while, Qin Feng said, "Little brother Lin, let's talk inside." Lin Tian nodded and followed Qin Feng and the others into a room. Staring at Lin Tian, Qin Feng asked, "Little brother, do you need anything?" Qin Feng and the others were very clear about what happened in the Imperial City. Originally, as a guest elder of the Imperial City's Array Manipulator Guild, when Lin Tian broke out of the prison, they should have been there to protect him. However, everything happened too quickly. By the time they received the news, the matter was already over. At this moment, Lin Tian was here. His clothes were still stained with blood. Naturally, they didn't think that Lin Tian was here just to drop by. They thought that he had something to discuss. "Help me break into the Imperial City and destroy the 3 great martial arts families." Lin Tian went straight to the point. Lin Tian could feel the strength of Qin Feng and the others. They were all in the Sea of Knowledge realm. Qin Feng and the others were moved. They all frowned. Lin Tian was a guest elder of the guild. To a certain extent, they could protect him. However, Lin Tian's words put them in a difficult position. One had to know that although the Array Manipulator Guild didn't fear the Empire, if they helped break into the Imperial City and destroy the 3 great martial arts families, the impact would be huge. "I don't need you to kill people. Just help me block some Sea of Knowledge realm experts. After the matter is done, I will give you the original form of the Solitary Lock rune and Gale rune." Lin Tiandao, Qin Feng, and the others' expressions changed. The Solitary Lock rune and Gale rune were very rare. For Array manipulators like them, it could be said to be priceless and had endless temptation. The 3 looked at each other and pondered. After a long time, Qin Feng looked up at Lin Tian and said, "Okay, we will help you." The Array Manipulator Guild was very mysterious. It was almost equivalent to a huge sect exposed to the world. Therefore, Qin Feng and the others didn't care much about the Empire's royal family and some martial arts families. Now Lin Tian asked for their help at the price of the Solitary Lock rune and Gale rune. Coupled with his status as a guest elder of the guild, they had no reason not to help. "See you at the Imperial City tomorrow morning." Lin Tiandao. After saying this, he didn't stay any longer and directly walked out of the guild. Staring at Lin Tian's leaving figure, Qin Feng's eyes shone. What a hot-blooded man! Saying this, Qin Feng looked at Elder Jean and Elder Nye and said, Old Jean, Old Nye, get ready. The president seems to be rushing back tonight. When Lin Tian left the Array Manipulator Guild, the sky had already completely darkened. Only bits of moonlight poured down on the earth, bathing the imperial city in a layer of silver light. Lin Tian didn't return to the general's mansion. Instead, he climbed to the top of the Immortal Knowledge Water Tower. This water tower was the tallest pavilion in the imperial city other than the imperial city's ancient buildings. Standing at the top of the water tower, his whole body was enveloped in the moonlight, and he could clearly see the entire imperial city. At this time, he was holding a small booklet in his hand. Flipping through this booklet, his eyes finally stopped at the last page. Next time we meet, I will no longer hide my feelings. I want to tell him that my heart has been on him since a long time ago. If I don't open my mouth, that guy definitely won't feel it. He's too stupid, too dumb. Lin Tian closed his eyes. His whole body seemed to merge into the night. Only a bone-piercing chill intertwined around him. The night gradually dispersed. Before the roosters crowed, there were already a few pedestrians on the streets of the imperial city. Compared to these pedestrians, the imperial soldiers guarding the gates of the imperial city had arrived even earlier. Some of them were yawning. These people had just woken up not long ago and had replaced the other soldiers guarding this place during the night. After all, this was the gate to the imperial city. There had to be people guarding this place 24 hours a day. Someone's coming? A soldier stared ahead and rubbed his eyes. In front of the imperial city's gate, on the street, a youth with a long sword was gradually approaching. Chapter 195, the third book to be published. After going through Immortal God's Tribulation and Dao Seal, this was the third book to be published. It was also the most nerve-wracking of the 3 times. That was because Dragon was writing this book full-time. And this time, it would be a real test for him to write full-time for the past 3 months. To be honest, the pressure was really, really great. No pop-up window, he started writing his first book in 2011. In the blink of an eye, it had been almost 4 years. 4 years ago, Dragon was still a student. 4 years later, his third book was already more than 500,000 words. Over the years, he had made many friends because of his writing. Everyone accompanied Dragon and gave Dragon support and encouragement. That was how Dragon grew to where he was today. He was really grateful to everyone. Because of everyone's constant support, Dragon was able to make some small achievements. He was able to support himself and not let his parents worry. Again, his heart was filled with gratitude. Friends who were familiar with Dragon knew that Dragon was the typical type of person who was terrible at writing. His writing speed was very slow. And after becoming a full-time writer, Dragon's writing speed was even slower. Dragon wanted to write every sentence, every word, and even every punctuation. He wanted to present the best text to everyone. Shifeng had been writing until now. He had used 2 big notebooks to write the outline. After this book was published, Dragon did not dare to make too many promises, but he would definitely work harder than before. He would work harder to update the book and write better so that everyone could enjoy it more. He wanted everyone to be more excited and relaxed. He wanted everyone to be more relaxed. He wanted everyone to be more comfortable. He wanted everyone to be more excited. This was the only way the Dragon could repay the big guy. In short, thank you everyone. The third time to be published is the biggest test. I sincerely hope that everyone can continue to support me. I hope that I can get good results. End of chapter. Chapter 196. First of all, I would like to thank all the brothers and sisters who subscribed and supported me. Thank you. Once it's up, I will work hard to update it. The few soldiers in front of the main gate looked forward. As the figure got closer, their faces darkened. Reading, "How dare you? How dare you approach the main gate with a weapon? Stop!" One of them shouted. The young man was dressed in a long robe. and the long sword in his hand shone with a cold light in the morning. He slowly walked forward. The young man was naturally Lin Tian. Still not stopping? Take him down? Immediately, a soldier stepped forward with a spear in hand. The tip of the spear was extremely sharp. Lin Tian's face did not show the slightest emotion. Only the depths of his eyes contained a frightening coldness. Before the approaching soldier could stab with his spear, he was frightened by this frightening coldness and staggered backwards. Staring at Lin Tian, the soldier's face turned pale. Then, he gritted his teeth and pressed down with his spear. With a clang, the sound of a sword rang out. Lin Tian didn't do anything, but the soldier who rushed forward fell to the ground. At this moment, the other soldiers at the main gate saw the blood on the ground. How dare you wave your blade at the soldiers of the Empire? Everyone go! Kill him on the spot. There were more than a dozen people guarding the entrance of the imperial court. At this moment, apart from the leader of the group, an early divine Vane realm expert, the rest of the people rushed forward. More than a dozen spears streaked across the air. Clang! The sound of swords rang out. Lin Tian's footsteps didn't change at all, but the soldiers who rushed forward were all sent flying. Only blood splashed in the air. It was extremely dazzling. At this moment, the sky was still a little hazy. There weren't many people on the streets of the imperial city, but there were still some. After seeing this scene, their expressions changed drastically. They couldn't believe that someone dared to openly kill the soldiers guarding the main gate. Was this a rebellion? Lin Tian was expressionless. To him, killing more than a dozen soldiers didn't make him feel anything. His footsteps were orderly as he walked into the imperial court. How dare you? The commander guarding the gate shouted angrily and took a step towards Lin Tian. However, what welcomed this person was an ice-cold sword light that instantly slashed open his throat. With a bang, the commander collapsed to the ground, his eyes wide open. He had died with remaining grievances. Lin Tian was expressionless. He walked over slowly and arrived in front of the Imperial Dynasty gates. This gate was 20 feet tall and was made from essence iron and Huangji wood. At this moment, maybe because it was still early, the Imperial Dynasty's main gate wasn't opened yet. Lin Tian shook his heart-spirit sword, and several sword lights swept across. Ka! 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 Along with a few crisp sounds, the tall Imperial Dynasty main gate cracked and collapsed. Dust rose as Lin Tian stepped through the broken door and walked straight into the Imperial Palace. Heavens, this, breaking into the palace. Do you really want to rebel? The pedestrians nearby were dumbfounded. There were many pavilions within the Imperial Palace, and the ground was paved with white jade bricks. There were also many wide paths that led in all directions. As far as the eye could see, the ancient structure in front was the most majestic. Even in the entire Imperial Palace, it stood out like a crane among chickens. It was the center of the Imperial Court, Northern Flame Palace. Lin Tian raised his head and stared at Beiyan Hall. He walked over step by step. At this moment, soldiers charged out from within the palace, and the sound of armor clashing could be heard. Lin Tian's intrusion into the Imperial Dynasty had naturally attracted the attention of the soldiers guarding the palace. At this moment, a dense group of soldiers charged out from the various entrances of the palace. They were either holding spears or spears, giving off a solemn atmosphere. A murderous aura immediately spread out. In the blink of an eye, Lin Tian was surrounded. What a thief! Everyone listen up, take him down. If he dares to resist, kill him. Someone shouted. This was a middle-aged man. He was a general of the Imperial Dynasty and was at the peak of the god bloodline realm. The soldiers that charged out all had cold expressions. After receiving the order from the Imperial Dynasty's general, they moved in unison. This was the inner part of the Imperial Palace, so these soldiers were all experts. Moreover, there were more than 700 of them. Kill! As the word kill rang out, the killing intent became even thicker. Lin Tian was expressionless as he raised his inner spirit sword. With a clang, the sword aura flew out, and a hurricane swept out in all directions. The The dozen or so 8th-level refinement body refinement cultivators who had rushed forward were instantly killed, falling straight into a pool of blood. Lin Tianyi walked towards Beiyin Hall, and the azure lightning sword aura spread out from his inner spirit sword. Clang! The sound of the lightning sword pierced everyone's eardrums. With every step Lin Tian took, someone would be killed. Facing these Imperial Dynasty soldiers, Lin Tian didn't say a word. He wouldn't ask them to back off and not stop him because he knew that it was impossible. These soldiers were paid by the royal family. They did not care who was right and who was wrong. They did not care who was right and who was wrong. They only worked for the royal family like machines and sold their lives for the royal family. Then, today, he would wash the imperial palace with blood. Clang! The azure lightning sword aura roared like a thunder dragon. As Lin Tianyi slashed out with his sword, the air screamed. A gust of wind was visible to the naked eye as it swept forward. Immediately, the group of soldiers that had charged forward was slashed until blood splattered in the air. Over a dozen people's armors were shattered, and they fell limply to the ground, dead just like that. The Imperial Dynasty's general's expression changed. He held his Xianhua axe and pressed forward personally. "All of you back off." As soon as he finished speaking, a dazzling true origin light shot out from his body, and a huge axe shadow appeared. Superior divine pulse martial technique, mountain-breaking axe. Trade or die, the general shouted. Lin Tian was expressionless. He raised his hand and slashed with his sword. With a whoosh, the middle-aged general's axe shadow shattered and dissipated like a spark. "You?" The general was shocked. He raised his hands high, and his aura rose. Lin Tian slashed with his sword again. The light of thunder carried the power of fire. In an instant, it flashed, leaving behind a long trail of blood. The middle-aged general's eyes were wide open. He maintained his posture of raising his axe, but there was a transparent hole in his throat. Blood was flowing out. Only when Lin Tian walked past him did that person finally fall to the ground with a bang. "General," someone exclaimed. Looking at Lin Tian again, many soldiers started to feel afraid. A peak divine pulse Imperial Dynasty general was killed in an instant. At this moment, as Lin Tianyi stepped forward, many soldiers started to retreat. "Ring the bell and inform the other generals," someone shouted. Instantly, someone left and charged into the palace. Lin Tian didn't react. He just stared at Beiyin Palace and walked forward step by step. "Damn it. Don't be afraid. We have more people. Stop him together. Go." How can a traitor be allowed to run rampant in the Imperial Palace? "Everyone, kill him together," a few people shouted. "This chapter isn't finished yet. Please turn the page." Although the middle-aged general was dead, there were still many captains. At this moment, these captains started to give orders. Hearing the orders, some soldiers were afraid, but they still charged forward. Lin Tian's expression was cold. He slashed with his sword mercilessly. Clang! The azure lightning sword force reverberated, bringing with it waves of bloody light and screams. At this moment, Lin Tian stepped into the Imperial Palace with a sword in his hand. He was like the Grim Reaper who reaped lives. At this moment, anyone who stood in front of him or attacked him was torn apart by the sword chi, without exception. Dong! The sound of a bell rang out, reverberating continuously for a long time. In an instant, everyone in the palace woke up. This bell meant that a powerful enemy had entered. In the Northern Flame Palace, Zhu Wudao and Jiang Runwen were standing together, discussing something softly. After hearing the bell, their expressions froze. "Your Majesty, someone has entered the palace." A voice came from outside the palace. Zhu Wudao's face darkened. "Who?" "Lin Tian," the person outside the palace said. Although Zhu Wudao had guessed it, when he heard the answer, his face still turned pale. Zhu Wudao pushed open the palace door. A white-haired elder stood outside. It was the person who cultivated the full arm palm. "You're courting death." Zhu Wudao's face darkened. Jiang Renwen's eyes were vicious as he stared outside the palace. "What an arrogant beast." Zhu Wudao waved his sleeves and walked out of the palace. Zhang Runwan gripped the sword in his hand and followed beside him. The white-haired elder's eyes were cold as he followed. Yesterday, he had been injured twice by Lin Tian on the streets of the imperial city, and had even been knocked unconscious by the old drunkard in the end. So, there was naturally a chill in his heart, and this anger naturally had to be blamed on Lin Tian. At the front of the Northern Flame Palace, there was a wide path paved with white jade bricks. It was more than 10 feet wide, and was more than 100 feet away from the Northern Flame Palace. At this moment, Lin Tianyi had killed his way here from the imperial city's main gate. Everywhere he passed, there were corpses lying on the ground. Blood dyed the ground red. Ah! Screams reverberated in the air. The soldiers in the palace tried to block and retreat. Occasionally, someone would be killed. After the bell rang, 3 generals at the peak of the Divine Pulse realm rushed here to stop Lin Tian, but they couldn't stop him at all. Damn it! The 3 generals were furious. So many of them together. But they couldn't stop a 16-year-old boy. At this moment, Zhu Wudao and the other 2 arrived. Looking at the scene in front of him, Zhu Wudao's face turned green. Lin Tian, how dare you? Zhu Wudao's voice was ice cold. Since the founding of Northern Flame Country, there had never been anyone who dared to barge into the Imperial Palace. Even spiritual sea realm experts didn't have the guts to do so. But now, Lin Tian, with his divine vein realm cultivation, had killed his way into the Imperial Palace alone and killed the palace guards. This was simply a slap to the face of the Northern Flame royal family. Seeing Zhu Wudao, the soldiers who were attacking Lin Tian stopped. Lin Tian raised his head and pointed the inner spirit sword at Zhu Wudao. His eyes were frighteningly cold. "Return her to me! How dare you? How dare you be rude to His Majesty?" One of the imperial city's generals shouted. Lin Tian's eyes were filled with killing intent. With a backhand swing, the thunderfire sword aura swept over. With a puff, the imperial city's general who spoke was beheaded on the spot. Such a scene made many soldiers even more terrified. The white-haired old man at the spiritual sea realm stared at Lin Tian. His expression changed slightly. You have reached the 9th level of the Divine Pulse realm? End of chapter. Chapter 197. The white-haired old man was an expert in the spiritual sea realm. Naturally, he could sense Lin Tian's cultivation. Moreover, Lin Tian's aura was much stronger than yesterday. This made the old man's face turn gloomy. "Is it you from the drunkard's gang?" Thinking about the middle-aged drunkard, the white-haired old man's face turned even gloomier. Lin Tian didn't even look at the white-haired old man. Instead, he stared straight at Zhu Wudao. "Give her back to me." His voice was cold. The white-haired old man's face turned gloomy. A mere Divine Pulse realm cultivator actually dared to ignore him. Zhu Wudao's eyes were indifferent. "You dare to barge into the imperial court? Do you still have the right to negotiate with me?" Lin Tian stared at Zhu Wudao and didn't say anything else. Only a bone-piercing murderous aura was emitted from his body as he stepped forward. "How dare you? Stop!" Someone shouted. The surrounding soldiers were densely packed. Seeing Lin Tian walking towards the Northern Flame Emperor with his sword, they naturally couldn't sit still and wait for their deaths. Instantly, a swarm of people rushed forward to stop Lin Tian. Lin Tian didn't say anything. He just raised his sword and swung it. Clang! The lightning sword radiance exploded and turned into a rain of swords that swept in all directions. Facing such a violent sword aura, how could some of the ordinary soldiers withstand it? One by one, they fell into a pool of blood. Life seemed extremely fragile at this moment. With every step Lin Tian took, several people would die under his sword. "Back off!" Zhu Wudao shouted. Hearing Zhu Wudao's order, the soldiers in the palace were a little confused. However, they didn't dare to disobey, and all backed off. In fact, at this very moment, these soldiers couldn't wait to back off. They were truly frightened by Lin Tian's terrifying combat strength. Zhu Wudao stared at Lin Tian. Do you think my Northern Flame Imperial Palace is so easy to barge into? Lin Tian did not say a word. Only the sword in his hand shone with a cold light as he walked towards Zhu Wudao. Zhu Wudao's face darkened, like the white-haired elders. He was the emperor of the Northern Flame Country, the ruler of the entire country. However, Lin Tian didn't care about him at all. He walked towards him step by step and didn't even care about what he said. He treated his words as air. Zhu Wudao's eyes turned cold. With a cold snort, a piece of golden jade appeared in Zhu Wudao's hand, and he began to inject his qi into it. Instantly, runes appeared on the ground, and a terrifying aura rushed out from Lin Tian. Lin Tian stopped in his tracks. At this moment, phantoms appeared all around him. There were powerful demonic beasts, powerful warriors, and even form sword lights. At this moment, with him as the center, the space within a radius of 10 feet was completely covered in a murderous aura. Moreover, the periphery seemed to be isolated by some kind of powerful force. Killing array? The white-haired old man was slightly shocked. Zhu Wudao's face was cold. A killing array between illusion and reality, engraved by a 6th-rank array manipulator. So what? Lin Tian was expressionless. The demonic beasts around him roared, the warriors roared, and the sword lights clanged as they rushed towards him. In this regard, his expression didn't change at all. The long sword in his hand shook, and suddenly, all the phantoms were shattered, turning into dust. However, this wasn't the end. In the next moment, more demonic beasts and warriors condensed. It's useless. Being trapped. Even a strong warrior of the sea of consciousness can't survive. Zhu Wudao's expression was indifferent. The demonic beasts roared, and the warriors looked ferocious. The dense sword aura continued to slash down. Among them, some of them were phantoms with pure knowledge, while others had real, killing power. It was very terrifying. Lin Tian stood in the middle of the array, dodging the sword lights and shattering the demonic beasts. At this moment, a young man rushed out from afar, anxiously rushing over. It was Zhu Yi. "Royal brother, can you spare him this once? Please remove the killing formation." Zhu Yi said anxiously. Zhu Yi received the old servant's report that Lin Tian had actually killed his way into the palace alone. His expression immediately changed. He knew that there was a terrifying killing array in the palace, and there were several tyrannical existences guarding it. It wasn't something a divine Vein Realm cultivator could casually barge in. Even if a normal Sea of Consciousness Realm cultivator broke in, there was almost a 90% chance of survival. Zhu Wudao glanced at Zhu Yi indifferently and said, "Retreat. Brother, please, just take it as I'm begging you." Zhu Yi said. As a prince, Zhu Yi didn't have many friends. He treated Lin Tian as a friend, so he didn't want Lin Tian to die here. Jiang Renwen swept a glance at Zhu Yi. "I told you to scram." With a wave of his right hand, a sword qi rushed out from Jiang Renwen's palm, pressing toward Zhu Yi. After a few months, Zhu Yi was only at the peak 9th rank of the body refinement realm. How could he withstand Jiang Renwen's terrifying sword qi? Suddenly, with a bang, he was sent flying, spitting out a mouthful of blood. Ninth Prince. In the distance, an old servant rushed over, supporting Zhu Yi. Zhu Wudao didn't even look at Zhu Yi. His gaze was still on Lin Tian. He didn't have the slightest reaction to Jiang Renwen's attack on Zhu Yi. In the end, although they were both princes, they had the same father, but different mothers. They weren't blood brothers, so their relationship wasn't deep. In Zhu Wudao's heart, Zhu Yi didn't have the slightest position. How could he compare to Jiang Renwen? The killing array was boiling. The cries of beasts and swords resounded. There were even more cultivators charging, surrounding Lin Tian. Standing in the middle of this killing array, Lin Tian raised his head. His gaze bypassed Zhu Wudao and landed on Jiang Renwen. "In a moment, I will cut your right hand piece by piece," he said coldly. Jiang Renwen stared at Lin Tian. His gaze suddenly became even more vicious. Zhu Wudao shook his head and said, "You don't have any chance." As he said this, the beasts and swords surrounding Lin Tian became even more terrifying, causing everyone's heart to tremble. Lin Tian's eyes were cold. Raising his left hand, strands of silver light intertwined. "Do you think this thing can really trap me?" He stared coldly at Zhu Wudao. As soon as he finished speaking, an even stronger silver light spread out from his left hand. At this moment, the heavenly One Soul mantra began to circulate crazily. Even some ordinary cultivators could feel the strong soul power, and all of them were shocked. "You!" Zhu Wudao's expression changed. As the former crown prince of the Northern Flame country and second on the wind cloud list, Zhu Wudao naturally knew what kind of power this was. It belonged to an array manipulator. Moreover, this kind of powerful soul power was far superior to that of some rank 4 array manipulators. Lin Tian's expression was cold. His 5 fingers on his left hand flicked lightly, and rays of light shot out. Instantly, the array patterns under his feet began to distort, and the entire killing array became chaotic. After a few months, his array manipulation skills had already reached the rank 4 level. With his rank 4 array manipulation skills and the divine One Soul technique, coupled with his powerful soul power, it was enough to temporarily put this killing array into hibernation. With a whoosh, the array patterns dimmed, and the killing aura disappeared. Lin Tianyi stepped forward. The inner soul sword trembled, and the lightning sword light swept forward. "Arrogant!" The white-haired old man snorted. He shattered Lin Tian's sword light with a palm strike, then pressed forward. Suddenly, there was a loud boom. Palm shadows filled the sky from the white-haired old man's hand. When it appeared, it turned into a life-stealing radiance that crushed towards Lin Tian. Lin Tian looked up, his eyes cold. In the next moment, a figure charged out from behind him, raising a hand to attack the white-haired old man. In an instant, the palm shadows in the sky were shattered. An old man of similar age appeared in front of the white-haired old man and blocked him. "Who is it?" The white-haired old man shouted, looking directly at the person in front of him. "Elder Jean." Zhu Wudao was shocked. Zhu Wudao naturally knew the elder of the Imperial City's Array Manipulator Guild, the rank 4 Array Manipulator Jean Bouet. Jean Bouet stopped the white-haired old man and said, "Lin Tian, you can't move." The white-haired old man's eyes darkened, and his expression turned cold. Zhu Wudao's expression turned even more unsightly. He glared at Jean Bouet and said in a deep voice, "Elder Jean, he's trespassing on the Imperial Palace today. He must be executed." "Elder Jean, what is the meaning of your actions?" "I'm helping him trespass on the Imperial Palace," Jean Bouet replied. Zhu Wudao's expression darkened. He did not expect Jean Bouet to do this. The Imperial family of Northern Flame and the Array Manipulator Guild have always minded their own business. "Elder Jean, aren't you afraid that the guild president will punish you for your actions?" Jean Bouet smiled faintly. "That's my business. There's no need for you to worry, Your Highness." To be honest, Jean Bouet found Zhu Wudao to be an eyesore. "Jean Bouet, you're looking down on the Imperial family of Northern Flame." A cold snort rang in the air. 3 figures suddenly walked out from the Northern Flame Palace. One of them flashed and launched a palm strike at Jean Bouet. "Same to you." Behind Lin Tian, another figure stepped out and pushed back the figure charging at Jean Bouet. "Lin Tian is a guest elder of the Array Manipulator Guild. Your Northern Flame country's new king has just ascended the throne, and you're already so ruthless to my guest elder's friend. Do you think the Array Manipulator Guild is a pushover?" The newcomer was dressed in a blue robe. He was the Imperial City Array Manipulator Guild's elder, a rank 4 array manipulator, Nie Yunfan. "Nie Yunfan, you're here too. What's the meaning of this? You want to be enemies with the Imperial family of Northern Flame?" The person who was pushed back by Nie Yunfan said in a deep voice, "Zhu Qingji, do you think the Imperial family of Northern Flame is so great?" Nie Yunfan's expression was indifferent. The 3 figures that stepped out from the Northern Flame Palace were all dressed in purple gold dragon robes. They were Zhu Qingji, Zhu Jianshi, and Zhu Pingluo. They were all members of the imperial family of Northern Flame, and were all in the Sea of Knowledge realm. Zhu Qingji stood opposite Nie Yunfan, while Zhu Jianshi and Zhu Pingluo stood not far away from Zhu Wudao. Second ancestor, third ancestor, fourth ancestor, Zhu Wudao bowed respectfully. Jiang Renwen stood beside Zhu Wudao, and his expression changed slightly. However, he quickly returned to normal. Zhu Jianshi walked forward and stared at Jin Bui and Nie Yunfan. He said indifferently, "No matter what your intentions are, he dares to barge into my Northern Flame Palace. He deserves death. Even if the two of you are here, you won't be able to protect him." As he spoke, Zhu Jinshi's right hand shook and a sword light condensed from True Yuan appeared. "Is that so? What if I join?" A voice sounded. Without a sound, another figure appeared behind Lin Tian. Zhu Jinshi's footsteps paused and his face sank. Qin Feng. P.S. Thank you to Tiger012456 for supporting us with 120,000 horizontal coins and becoming the Silver Guild Master of the 10 Directional Divine Kings. Thank you, Brother 1995 for your support of 10,000 sector coins. Thank you. Finally, I would like to thank all the brothers and sisters who have subscribed for my support. Thank you all. Dragon will continue to write the 3rd chapter. End of chapter. Chapter 198. Naturally, Zhu Jianshi was acquainted with Qin Feng, the vice president of the Royal Capital's Array Manipulator Association. However, he would have never imagined that Qin Feng would also barge into the royal palace today. Not only that, it was obvious that Qin Feng and Jin Bui were on Lin Tian's side. Ghibli Wenxuanet, what is the meaning of this? Zhu Jianshi said in a deep voice. Just a guest elder of the guild to protect us. Qin Feng said. Qin Feng, Jin Bui, and Ye Yunfan all stood in front of Lin Tian. Staring at this scene, Zhu Wudao's face turned ugly. He didn't expect Lin Tian to be able to invite these 3 big shots. Brother Lin, in the distance, Zhu, he was shocked. Obviously, he didn't expect this scene. Zhu Jianshi stared at Qin Feng and said, "You guys want to be enemies with the royal family for a divine pulse cultivator?" Qin Feng smiled indifferently. A divine pulse cultivator? Have you seen a 16-year-old peak divine pulse cultivator? Have you seen a 16-year-old 4th-stage array manipulator? Have you seen a divine pulse cultivator who barged into the imperial palace alone for friendship? As he spoke, Qin Feng glanced at Zhu Wudao. Compared to your Northern Flame royal family's new king, who just ascended to the throne and already ruthlessly dealt with loyal officials who had fought in the battlefield for dozens of years, don't you think that the little cultivator you speak of is very cute? Hearing Qin Feng's words, Zhu Wudao's face turned green. However, he could only clench his fist tightly. Zhu Jianshi and the other 2 didn't change their expressions. Obviously, they already knew about Zhu Wudao's actions. Zhu Jianshi said, "Wudao is in the wrong regarding General Ji Yuanshan. After this, we will naturally punish him severely." Then, Zhu Jianshi looked at Lin Tian. As for him, no matter what, he broke into the palace today and committed a great crime. Only death can atone for his sins. Then there's no room for discussion. Qin Feng smiled. Zhu Jianshi and the other 2's expressions darkened. You guys really want to be enemies with the royal family. Don't think that the royal family of the Northern Flame Imperial Palace is great. When have we ever been afraid of anyone? Qin Feng said. The expressions of Zhu Jianshi and the other 2 turned completely cold. They didn't say anything more. Let's see who's better, Zhu Jianshi said. As he spoke, Zhu Jinshi's footsteps shook as he headed straight for Lin Tian. Qin Feng coldly snorted. He raised his hand and shot out a hurricane, blocking Zhu Jinshi's path. Don't get the wrong opponent. As soon as he finished speaking, Qin Feng raised his palm again. The tyrannical power of his palm was terrifying. In the other 2 directions, Zhu Qingji and Zhu Pingluo both rushed towards Lin Tian, but they were blocked by Jin Bui and Nie Yunfan. For a moment, The 6C of consciousness realm powerhouses fought at the same time, immediately rolling out waves after waves of true Yuan gales. Lin Tian's body suddenly moved. His right leg fiercely stamped on the ground, and immediately turned into a flash of light and rushed in the direction of Zhu Wudao and Jiang Renwen. The long sword in his hand was raised straight up. Humph! A cold snort sounded out. A light flashed, and the white-haired old man appeared in front of him, slapping out with his palm. Scram! Lin Tian's eyes shot out two piercing cold lights, and he slashed out with his sword. With a clang, the lightning sword flashed and turned into a flash of lightning, rushing towards the white-haired old man. The white-haired old man waved his arm, and a huge palm print came down, colliding with the lightning sword. The two collided head-on, head-on, head-on. Immediately, they exploded. Lin Tian stopped and stared at the white-haired old man. His eyes were filled with ruthlessness, cold and frightening. Facing such a gaze, the white-haired old man actually trembled for no reason. But then his eyes became cold. Don't think that you can do anything with the support of those three people. The power of the royal family is more than this. You can only die. Lin Tian raised his true spirit sword. The lightning sword flashed, and the fire sword intertwined. The light of the lightning flame was vast and mighty. Clang! His footsteps paused, and in a flash, he rushed out and slashed at the white-haired old man. The white-haired old man snorted and raised his palm to meet Lin Tian's sword. Clang! 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 The sound of metal colliding reverberated in the air. And NBS, the white-haired old man's eyes were cold and gloomy. His figure suddenly flashed, leaving behind afterimages in the surroundings. It was hard to tell whether he was real or not. Flowing cloud shadow. Zhu Wudao was slightly shocked. Flowing cloud, overlapping shadows was a sea of consciousness realm movement technique. In terms of quality, it could be said to be number one among sea of consciousness realm movement techniques. Not only could this movement technique increase the speed of the cultivator, but it could also create dense phantoms to confuse the enemy. It was very difficult to deal with. Qin Feng and Zhu Jianshi were fighting. They glanced at Lin Tian. He is just a divine vein cultivator. He is already no match for a spiritual sea realm expert. Now that he has encountered the flowing cloud, overlapping shadows, he can only die. It's over, Zhu Jianshi said. Qin Feng faintly smiled. You're thinking too much. Don't forget he's the same as me, a formation controller. Hearing this, Zhu Jianshi frowned. At this time, there were hundreds of phantoms around Lin Tian. Ordinary people couldn't tell who was real and who was fake. However, in these phantoms, Lin Tian's expression was incomparably calm. He stood quietly in the same place. Suddenly, he raised his right hand and slashed towards the left. Puff! Blood sputtered. The dense phantoms disappeared, and a figure flew out. This figure was naturally the white-haired old man. Zhu Jianshi and the others' faces changed. The white-haired old man who used the flowing cloud, overlapping shadows, was actually sent flying. I already said that he's the same as me, a formation controller, Qin Feng said indifferently. As he spoke, Qin Feng slapped Zhu Jianshi with his palm. Zhu Jianshi's face was cold. He raised his palm and stood together with Qin Feng again. The white-haired old man flew out and stabilized his figure in a sorry state. He stared at Lin Tian in disbelief. At this moment, there was a deep sword mark on his chest. Blood kept flowing out. How can you tell my real body apart? The white-haired old man shouted. Lin Tian tilted his head, looked at Zhu Wudao and Jiang Renwen, and pressed forward. He didn't care about the white-haired old man at all. The white-haired old man's face sank. He swayed his body and blocked in front of Lin Tian again. He slapped his palm down. This palm was more terrifying than any of the previous ones. Lin Tian held the heart-spirit sword tightly. His eyes became incomparably cold. The thunderflame sword chi suddenly rushed up. Clang! The violent sword whistled and pierced people's eardrums. The thunder flame sword chi turned into a storm of thunder and fire, sweeping forward. The white-haired old man snorted and waved his palm. A huge palm shadow condensed and formed. At the same time, the white-haired old man's eyebrows lit up as if there was a halo in his mind. After that, the white-haired old man's attack suddenly became several times more ethereal. Every move and style seemed to be natural, making it difficult for people to resist. Lin Tian took a step back. His right leg stepped on the ground, and the ground suddenly cracked. You're only in the divine pulse realm. How dare you contend with a sea of consciousness cultivator? The white-haired old man said coldly. With a boom, another palm pressed down. Lin Tian slashed out the thunderflame sword chi and took another step back. He was shocked by the white-haired old man's attack. Wong! The white-haired old man waved his hand, and the third palm fell. Lin Tian held his sword across his chest. With a clang, he retreated again. The white-haired old man smiled coldly. The light between his eyebrows was even brighter. That is, sea of consciousness. It's the light emitted by the sea of consciousness. This is the power of a sea of consciousness expert. Once a sea of consciousness expert opens up a sea of consciousness, his divine sense is almost invincible. That Lin Tian no longer has the ability to resist. That's natural. How can a mere divine pulse cultivator contend against a sea of consciousness cultivator? Just now, that senior just didn't use his full strength. It's estimated that he used 50% of his strength. Of course! All the soldiers showed a look of admiration and yearning. Not long ago, Lin Tianyi came from the main gate of the imperial court. No one could stop him. Even the generals at the peak of the divine pulse realm were no match for him. But now, facing the white-haired old man, Lin Tian was retreating again and again. These soldiers became excited. Again, the white-haired old man said coldly. The fourth palm pressed down. At the same time, the white-haired old man used the flowing cloud shadow movement technique. Together with his divine sense, he forced Lin Tian to retreat again and again. Lin Tian was expressionless. He retreated again and again. The white-haired old man said coldly, "You're quite resistant. Let's see how long you can last." As he spoke, the light between his eyebrows became more intense. The palm force also became more tricky, causing the air to tremble. Bang! 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 The white-haired old man waved his palm, causing the air to tremble, forcing Lin Tian to retreat again and again. At this time, the violent palm force even scratched Lin Tian's clothes. Heart-shattering palm! Die! The white-haired old man shouted. With a boom, the white-haired old man threw out the most powerful move in the all-arm palm. In an instant, a wave of killing intent swept up. Enough! At this time, Lin Tian opened his mouth. His eyes were extremely cold. Raising his left hand, Lin Tianyi grabbed the wrist of the white-haired old man's right hand in a split second, holding it firmly in his palm. The white-haired old man's expression changed. He didn't expect Lin Tian to be able to block this attack. Clang! The ear-piercing sound of the sword rang. Lin Tian's eyes were cold as he slashed with the inner spirit sword. With a puff, blood splattered out. The white-haired old man only felt a chill in his right arm. Then he screamed in pain. His right hand was chopped off by Lin Tian. How is this possible? Everyone's expression changed. At this time, even Zhu Jianshi and the others were shocked. Qin Feng said indifferently, as a fourth-rank array manipulator, his soul force can cause the killing array engraved by a sixth-rank array manipulator to enter a temporary dormant state. How much trouble do you think ordinary divine sense can bring him? Zhu Jianshi and the others' faces became even more ugly. They stared at Lin Tian with even more killing intent. Bastard! The white-haired old man roared. One of his arms was chopped off by Lin Tian. He actually crippled one of his arms. With a boom, the white-haired old man's aura sword. His left hand waved the all-arm palm and pressed down on Lin Tian again. Lin Tian's eyes were cold. The aura around his body also began to rise. The Thunder Flame's sword was vast and mighty as it suddenly slashed down. The palm and the sword collided, and the violent airflow caused everyone to be shocked. It was also at this time that Lin Tian raised his left hand and clenched it into a fist. Instantly, an even more berserk aura surged out from the tip of his fist. It was like a volcano that was about to erupt, and also like a peerless murderer that was about to awaken from his fist. The terrifying true essence fluctuation caused Qin Feng and the rest to be moved. Boom! In the next moment, a resplendent fist light rushed out from Lin Tian's left fist. It was extremely fast and instantly pierced through the white-haired old man's chest. End of chapter. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.